I think heroin is bad. Do you agree with that? Wait, really?
No. Opiates are a boon to humanity.
Okay, I guess people abusing heroin.
I mean, look, I was on it for 20-something years. It wasn't because it was terrible.
Would it be triggering for you if we talked about your early heroin and opiate usage? Like, is this gonna make you want to relapse? If you start shooting up in here, I'm gonna feel so bad.
I spent a lot of my recovery with active drug users.
That first hit of heroin.
Yeah, the first hit was like home. The anxiety was gone. You know, if you look at the side effects of opiates, euphoria. And so there was this feeling of euphoria, of connection. And I should say the person I first did it with is dead. It's a bargain with the devil.
Can you explain what a heroin craving feels like?
12 hours in, you start to get a little sweaty, and then the stomach gives way. Your nose starts to run, sneezing and yawning, and then your joints start to hurt. The thing about it, while this is happening, you know that there's one way out. The vast, vast majority of people who have gotten off of opiates have done it without Ibogaine.
So then the first time you use Ibogaine, what is that experience like?
Within 40 minutes, my withdrawal symptoms were alleviated. I went on this 3-day journey.
Where'd you go?
It was just like this frog orgy that I was in for hours. And the words, dead so long, the earth's gone through you. And the reason I'm hesitating is because that's not what happened with everybody. I'm not supposed to say this publicly, but whatever.
Dimitri, thank you so much for joining me today, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I really appreciate it. This is going to be a lot of fun. At one point in time, you were known as a shaman. You were a shaman. You were helping addicts recover from their addiction by using psychedelics, specifically Ibogaine. And then later in your career, you became a bit of a critic of that, but have continued to sort of help people and heal through their personal journey, not only with drugs, but just in their general life using other psychedelic substances. I want to get into all of this.
Right on.
But I think an interesting place to start, and this is going to be political, okay?
Yeah, well, I'm down with that.
I think heroin is bad. Do you agree with that? Wait, really?
No.
That is shocking. I thought, okay, I'm going to say something dumb up top to get this guy to be like, okay, yeah.
No. I mean, if you mean heroin and you mean opiates, right?
Yeah.
Opiates are a boon to humanity.
Okay, I guess people abusing heroin. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but like good drugs, bad drugs, now we're getting into harm reduction right away. Yeah, I mean, look. I was on it for 20-something years,
Yeah.
right? I realized that this was actually a lighter while you're out of the room. So the speaking of addiction, now I'm going to be touching that all the time, wanting to light it. But anyways, I was an addict for addicted to opiates for over 20 years, and it wasn't because it was terrible. It became terrible.
That's a good aspect.
So there is a couple of opioid crises. I'll start out by saying that.
Yes.
One is that folks are dying from opioids in the United States and mostly in Western countries, around the world. But there is a crisis of overdose. And the other one is a lack of access to opiates in poorer countries, where they can help with when people need opiates. So I would say the drug is perhaps neutral.
That's fair.
And it's the way in which one uses it and engages with it. And so I would say that heroin gave me so much and took away much more. I began my use of all drugs from Detroit as a very young kid. And at first it was a twofold. It was sort of an expansion, of my world, and a balm to my pain, and expansion in who I met. And Leonard Cohen says something about where in the street where the races meet. It's like this. In the drug world, these people who never would talk to each other are meeting, and I'm picking up the poet's lines, but something like that. But expanded me because I think it had to do with my artistic curiosity as well, right? Because all these great artists were using it, and then it was ubiquitous in Detroit. I mean, it was everywhere when I was growing up in the 70s.
How old were you the first time you did heroin or an opiate? Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt this amazing program, but I need a little bit of help. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably see our subscriber number right down here. And if you're able to, it would mean the world if you could subscribe. That is the best way to support this show, because when you subscribe, I'm able to show it to potential guests or to different brands and stuff like that. And it really, really helps grow the show, get us cooler guests, have cooler conversations, and it helps everything so, so much. So if you don't mind, thank you so much. Let's get back to it.
Like maybe 17. But,
Oh, wow.
But I was doing like alcohol from as a kid. And
Right, cigarettes and
glue
shit.
and cigarettes. I was like one of those like East Side kid movies, like 10-year-olds smoking.
Yeah.
I know they don't have them anymore, but they call them Eve cigarettes. They were like ladies
Oh,
cigarettes.
yeah. But those are nice though. They're kind of soft. Like,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
feel
well,
nice.
they're for ladies, right? But they were on the bottom shelf at the store, at the supermarket. I was 10, and my brothers used to stuff the cartons down my pants and send me out of the store.
Wow.
But so always there was an experiment with drugs and a desire to change my consciousness, right? And I think it was both exploratory and a release of pain. We used to do this trick as a kid where we'd breathe really super fast and then have like the big kid like squeeze your stomach, and then we would drop, and you'd sort of get this breath work thing.
Wim Hof.
Yeah, Wim Hof. Yeah. Like
You were the first Wim Hof.
Yeah, we were the
basically.
first one in Detroit, except for it was just cold.
Yeah.
Because it was Detroit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, would it be triggering for you if we talked about your early heroin and opiate usage? Like, is this going to make you want to relapse? If you start shooting up in here, I'm going to feel so bad. You're not going to, right?
I don't think it's no. It would be. It's what I do.
Okay.
I've spent
All right,
I've spent a lot of my recovery with active drug users in the harm reduction setting. It doesn't trigger me at all.
How is it when you say it gave you a lot? That first hit of heroin.
Yeah, the first hit was like home. Like the anxiety was gone. There was if you look at the side effects of opiates, right? They have all that big list, may cause constipation, blah, 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 euphoria, blah, 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 euphoria, right? It's like, it's a side effect, right? And so there was this feeling of euphoria, of connection. And for a long time, I was a musician and a writer and a performer. I could write and interact and fuck and do everything on it for many years. It took me a long time to hit my bottom with that. So initially it was just this release of pain. I should say the person I first did it with is dead. And he was like a dear friend of mine I grew up with in Detroit, Paul Hodge. He's dead now. And then we did it again together at the Hotel Chelsea, of all places. But just to be I don't know if you know the history of that place, but maybe some of your listeners will know sort of a legendary drug spot. But I lived there for years. But anyways, so at first it was beautiful, and my world sort of expanded. It was like a balm, a salve on my spirit. And I could write and perform and stay up and do my shitty day job and then play in the clubs at night and do all that shit easier. And then, gradually it's Faustian. It's a bargain with the devil. My world became smaller and smaller. And what maybe at first was a conscious and perhaps unconscious reaction towards, everything, including the economic system, made me an absolute slave to the economic system. I was, I think Burroughs talked about how the junkie becomes the perfect consumer, and they can degradate the product and degradate the consumer at the same time, which is like a metaphor for all all the capitalist markets, but I think in a very big way. And so my life became very small.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I ended up back in Detroit, after being in New York and being sort of politically involved and as an artist and all kinds of stuff, and I ended up back in my parents' basement.
That was rock bottom.
Yeah. My wife, who's a common law wife, who was pregnant, died with the baby. There was just there was just a lot of death.
Complications from drug use.
It was. This is one of the reasons why. Well, it is an illustration of why like harm reduction is so important. She could be alive today, and maybe that child would be alive, but she got endocarditis, which was a result of using syringes that weren't clean. And she was in Georgia. She was an actress. She was working in Georgia at the time, and there was no access to safe syringes, safe access to injection equipment. And there was a lot of death. You got to remember, I'm 61, and the amount of death experienced for someone my age who was living in sort of the Lower East Side of New York and the epicenter of the HIV crisis, and there was a sort of a first wave, which is called heroin chic in the early 90s. Just a lot of death, a lot of death. By the way, this neighborhood used to be like a big dope spot.
Yeah.
Insane
Crazy.
dope spot. Like Hasids and Puerto Ricans and dope, man. It's
Yeah.
like a really nice combo, actually.
Yeah. I
Get a
mean,
nice coffee anywhere.
I think that little arc is actually important for people because for me, I've never done heroin. I don't really do drugs, to be completely honest with you, despite looking like I invented weed. But I do think that it's important to highlight the seduction of that first hit, in that I understand why people get hooked on it and how it can overcome and suppress all of that pain, all of the problems that you're dealing with. This one little substance can make everything go away and give you so much more. Like, it is truly a Faustian bargain, the way you put it.
Yeah.
It gives you so much, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, it just becomes all consuming.
Yeah, depending on the individual, because there's plenty of folks that could do that hit. There's people do heroin twice a year. Right now, it's more complicated because of fentanyl, and I wouldn't recommend experimenting at all.
Do you think people are doing heroin just like casually, like twice a year?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
People that are just non-addictive.
Yeah,
in
they're
nature.
it's just not going to happen. I know people like that. I'm just an enthusiastic guy. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah.
But do you think it's more addictive than other things? My assumption is like it's so good that
there's a physical dependency on it that makes it different than cocaine. I mean, I was addicted to both. I was speedballing, which I can talk about that, which is the combination of cocaine and heroin, injecting it for many, many years. And I was in psychosis for a long time. But is it more addictive? It's physically dependent. You can become physically dependent within a matter of weeks if you do it on a daily basis. But there are people that do moderate opiate intake, right? And there are people that can do it for pain and then with some discomfort get off of it and never think about it. It's like, that Scooby-Doo, like that thing. Those of us who go, they get that little, like, what's that? Whatever that is, that want to stay there.
Yeah, I met a guy one time outside of a 7-Eleven in
Sounds good already.
Yeah, exactly.
The 7-Eleven where?
This is in Apopka, Florida.
Oh, wow.
This is a little bit of a kind of a rough area.
I need some meth already.
Yeah, exactly. And I was talking to him, and he was a homeless dude, kind of like in between. And I'd always seen him at this same 7-Eleven, and I kind of got to know him, and we'd hang out for a little bit and talk. And he kind of told me his story, which was crazy. He had a landscaping company. Mm-hmm. He had 2 kids. He had a wife. They were living nearby in Apopka. Not extremely wealthy, but just kind of like living like a regular kind of like lower, maybe like middle class lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And he was in his 20s. He was a skateboarder. He liked skateboarding. Mm-hmm. And he was skateboarding and rolled his ankle. Mm-hmm. Had to get ankle surgery. Mm-hmm. Got prescribed oxys or something. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong. Some type of opiate he was prescribed.
Yeah.
Loved him.
Yeah.
Overprescribed. He got a bunch.
Yeah.
Started popping them, and now he's popping 2, 3 a day, and he sees the bottom of that bottle and the pills inside going away.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, shit. And then he starts talking to a guy that can get him some more pills, and he gets more pills, and now he's like, okay, I got more pills. And now he's just like, his ankle's healed. He's got the surgery. The pain's mitigated, but now he keeps on finding these pills. And then he moves off the pills and starts getting into the actual heroin and just lost his business. Lost his landscaping company. His wife took the kids, hasn't seen his kids in 3 years, and now he's outside of a 7-Eleven trying to get some food, trying to get money to get more heroin. And I was like, holy shit, that is a crazy 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah, I've heard a similar version of that story many, many times.
That sucks.
Yeah, it does. There's a couple of things that we should think about. We should think about the way, that story brings up so much. So there's a medical entry into that.
So there's a couple things to note with this.
Yeah. So there's the medical thing, right? It was prescribed, and in the psychedelic world, we talk about holding, and holding is kind of what you're doing now. You've created an environment, and you're holding the space and it's kind of what we could talk more about what you do, because there is similarities what you do in terms of attunement, but that's in a later part of the conversation. So I don't want to. I have a tendency to digress, as I'm doing now, talking about digression. but so there's the medical aspect of it. He had a legitimate medical problem. He was prescribed this drug. Now, the doctor, we know now, could have been influenced by the commodification of that drug. So the information that was given to the doctors it could have been from the Sackler family or some other pharmaceutical, which was saying that, these won't get addicted. There's such a thing as breakthrough pain and all this kind of nonsense that doctors swallowed whole. So we should remember that as we think about psychedelics going into the medical system, right? And so doctors are equally susceptible to what I believe is what is the direct result of a for-profit medical establishment and pharmaceutical industry. So he was given for pain, like what kind of holding, what kind of time did that doctor have? It could have been a pill mill. It could have been a legitimate doc who he or she or they were just trying to do their thing, right? So, what kind of follow-up did they have? Did they check in with this guy? Okay, so there's that aspect of it. Then there's the aspect of what was going on with that guy personally, What was happening in his spirit? Was he, did those kids, was there pressure? Could he not skate anymore? And then I believe that also has to do with societal issues, right? Like the pressure to earn a living, the pressure to be a father, to be a man. A lot of these folks are men. A lot of them are working class men, right? That's sort of a typical demographic. The guy works with his body, right? And that's a lot of that demographic. So what is it about that segment of the society? And what race was this guy?
He's a white guy.
So he's a white guy. So there's also an interesting demographic with white working class young men who are whose death their rate of death is on the increase, right? And so that's something to look at. So there's those aspects. And then again, back to what, not just the material and situational aspects of that young man's life, but what's going on inside him. What was his history? What kind of trauma had he endured? And that type of thing. And where was he able to express it or find a way? So you find a home in opioids. I want to suggest one thing. If the opioids were legal, he might not be in front of that 7-Eleven. Because the other thing about opioids is that, and that's not true with other drugs, we got to take drug by drug, right? But you could be a decent worker and be strung out on opiates all the time. Just as long as you got your opiates. And that's been proven over and over again. I'm sure that the illegality in that played a role in that. So a role in the dysfunction of his life. That's not to say that if all heroin was legal, that there wouldn't be dysfunction. There certainly would be, as we can see with cannabis now. I mean, I think there's, especially the high level of THC, there's problems with it. There's issues with people who overconsume tobacco or alcohol. But there's very few people that are sort of stealing to get alcohol. There are people that just end up on Skid Row and are begging. But so all of that plays in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say legality, if it was like, do you see a future or some type of utopia where opiates or heroin is legal?
I don't think it's even a utopia. I hope to see a future in it. It's wrought with all kinds of problems, and I think it should be, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at a place like Portugal, where they decriminalized everything and the rate of crime just went way down. Now, they still have social issues. They decriminalized it. They offered, treatment. They offered jobs. They offered maintenance, all that kind of. There's heroin maintenance in Switzerland. There's heroin maintenance in Vancouver. The people that like it best are the police. Because as much as I don't want to be on their side about anything, but because these sort of nuisance crime goes down. Now there's pushback in places like Portland that's saying that the sort of the homeless population and the crisis of unhoused people is directly related to that. But I think that's bullshit. I think the problem with housing is that there's a problem with housing. 40% of the New Yorkers who are unhoused are working people, which should anyone should have a home, and especially if you got a fucking job.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you have a job and you're also addicted to heroin, it might be a little bit harder.
Well, it is. I think
right?
that illegality. Look, I was like what they call functioning. I mean, I'll go out on a limb here and say I'm a pretty high functioning human being, right? But I was able to maintain a job at least. I was parking cars at the end, but I went to work every fucking day.
While you were on
Yeah. I never, but I was scamming and I was hustling. I was doing selling. I was doing all kinds of other shit, but I always had a gig or 3 or 4 hustles. I think it's just kind of who I am, but it was also coming to a point where that might have broken down. What I'm saying, and that broke down mainly because of the cocaine use too, by the way, because I could have probably maintained on that dope run for much longer, right? Especially if I had some sort of maintenance thing. I mean, your tolerance goes up. It's complex. It's complex, and I think that's maybe the main issue is that we can't arrest it away. That's not going to happen, and we can't even treat it away. So the harm reduction, which harm reduction is basically a movement, for those that don't know, that came out of the HIV crisis that I was talking about before, where people were just dying from HIV/AIDS. And like so many people at that time when I was coming up about your age, man, Lower East Side, were just, were dying. Queer people who were my friends in like the artistic world and the community I was involved in, and then dope fiends like me who were just, I don't know what the statistic was. It was some insane statistic, like 4 out of 10 or something like that. People were injecting. And so it started by just giving out clean access to clean needles. But the basic tenet of that is that you meet people where they are. And, as my work as sort of like coaching or counseling people who are going through a drug problem, I never judge the drug. I can have judgment around, or I can use discernment around the behavior, right? So if someone's not keeping up with an obligation, they're just not keeping up with an obligation, right? But there are some dope fiends that can do that. And what was my point with this? The point is that we have to have a nuanced way of looking at that. We're far too fucking nuanced. And that's the problem with psychedelics. Is the way that it's being presented is not nuanced. I just met a lady in kind of a great couple in a coffee shop. That's sort of this cool nerdy couple. I mean, they were pretty nerdy. They just wanted Superfly was playing. There's a Greek restaurant around the corner, by the way. And so I walked in there and they gave me a menu and talked to the guy in Greek a little bit. Then I went to the coffee shop and they noticed the menu. There's this nerdy couple, like probably in their 50s, and she just wanted to talk, and they were he was British and kind of eccentric, and they're cute, And so we were talking about Superfly because it was playing. But anyways, they started talking about psychedelics, and she asked, "Will it work for anxiety or phobia?" And I just don't think this is not antibiotics, right? That's what people are looking for when they're talking about things like addiction, things like sadness or depression or anxiety or phobia or rumination that goes out of control or whatever it is. But they're looking for an antibiotic solution to that. It's way more complex, way more complex, and quite in some ways beautiful, but.
Yeah, we can touch on that. I'm curious about the psychedelic component, but I guess just to button up the legality angle, I guess I would be again, I've never done drugs really. I'm not going to pretend to be some type of expert in this, but my suspicion is like, hey, as drugs become introduced into society more, there are more people that are strung out, and I guess maybe there's a issue with legality. Like obviously if you decriminalize it, there will be less crime objectively because that's ratio is going down. But I guess I don't know. I'm just a little skeptical that humans can handle the addictive nature of heroin specifically.
Well, you could just look at places that have done it. Just look at Portugal. Just look at, maybe provide that statistic for your listeners and viewers. It just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. And I think with drugs like heroin, there wouldn't be an advertising campaign like there sort of is with weed. There might be an argument. I don't know if weed consumption has gone up. I don't know. But it'd be interesting to look at. But the same thing happened with alcohol. We've been through this. We simply know. And we know we're doing a shitty job of it right now.
Now, I wonder if you can casually use alcohol or weed in ways that you can't casually use heroin. I know that obviously you were kind of talking about like functionality and holding a job, but could you use heroin at like a party and just kind of do it one time?
There's a guy, Carl Hart. He was making a lot of press last year. I know Carl a little bit. Carl has been talking about being a record, and he's a professor at Columbia. He's talking a professor of maybe psychiatry. I don't know. I should know what, but he's written a couple books, and you know, he was on Joe Rogan, been on all kinds of stuff, and he talked about being a casual heroin user, and I think it's possible. You know, like right now, it's fucking because of the illegality. It's dangerous. What I know is because of the illegality that there are people who are dead now that wouldn't have been dead, and whether they lived to recovery or not, they're still human. And so, I mean, the question is, what do we do with people who aren't going to get in recovery, who are just going to use? I mean, are they just not valuable? I mean, the guy you talked to is a lot of people who use drugs. I'm not saying everybody can be a sweetheart. Yeah. And you know, maybe he was pulling a little bit of a con to get that 5 out of you, but like, you know, there's what did he say? We're all sensitive people, so much to give, right? So like, you know, there's a lot of sensitive folks doing this, and what do we do with them? So the answer to your question is, yeah, you could. You could do heroin casually. One of my hustles was I would go get dope for people who wanted to do it once a month, like some stockbroker or shit. I charged the fuck out of them, right? Because they're too afraid to cop. And I had customers like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what drug, what illegal, you know, cocaine is different than heroin, is different than MDMA, is different than ketamine, is different, you know, all these drugs are different. But what we know is that we can't legislate our way out of it. I mean, look, if you're talking about complete oppression, then yeah, it could work. I mean, China wiped out, you know, the opioid use. Mao wiped it out.
Right.
Unless we're willing to go to, and we've used draconian measures here. Let's be clear. We incarcerate more people than anybody else on the planet. This is the least free country in the world, just based on statistics. If you base it on how many people are in chains, this is the least free country in the world.
Right, based off that metric, sure.
It's a pretty good metric.
Yeah, but I guess I wonder like about, you know, other places that have done it. Obviously, Portugal has seen success with it, but I wonder if there's co-founders within the society that would lead Portugal to have better success than we would. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if there's a different social pressure. Like, and again, I don't know, right? But some people I've talked to that have done drugs, either, you know, like huffing paint or whatever else, it seems like it can be some type of social escapism. You're ultimately trying to substitute a different reality brought on by this drug that can take the place of your current reality, which might be a little bit painful or difficult to handle, whether it's anxiety or you know, some type of trauma that you've gone through, et cetera. So I wonder if our society is set up in such a way that it could handle the amount of people that would want to substitute their reality with substances, and that maybe countries that have affordable health care, you know, maybe less of like anxious work culture might be.
Yeah, I think you're talking about what like the conversations around addiction and trauma are missing, and I believe it's the economic structure, and I don't know, I haven't looked into this. You might look at Portugal as, you know, they have it's more of a homogenous population, and they're Portuguese for the most part, although there's a large African and Arab community there. And there's you know, there's tradition there that, I mean, there's affordable healthcare, all that stuff. I mean, when we look at any sort of health we have to look at the, you know, what do they call it? The social impact, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that, but, you know, I mean, that's the shit we need to change, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. I don't think that's a cop out, but I do think it's worth it.
You know, I mean, I don't know if this relates, but
what's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you need to get your labs done. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you're 35, you feel your testosterone starting to go down a little bit. You got to get your blood work done, see what's going on inside your body. Maybe you're 25, maybe you're 27 like me, and you're like, oh, I don't need to do this. No. Now is the best time to get your blood work done, because now you get a baseline for the rest of your life. Now, here's the problem with getting your blood work done. You got to go through and find a lab that accepts your insurance. It's a whole big thing. Then you have to find someone to read and interpret your blood work and then give you some type of dietary change that's going to actually improve your labs based off what they find. This is a huge stress and it's a huge problem. I was bitching about it to a friend of mine, and he was like, dude, why don't you check out Merrick Health? It's from my boy Derek from More Plates, More Dates, and it's absolutely amazing. It saved me so much time and so much energy and money you would not believe. So with Merrick Health, it's super simple. You do one little entry-level questionnaire. It goes through your whole medical history. It goes through your kind of like routine, what type of fitness you like to do, what your diet is, and then they send you a kit. You send your blood work right back, and then within a couple days, they tell you exactly what's going on with your blood work, whether your levels are amazing, whether they're pretty good and they could be better, or whether they're bad and what you can do to improve them. If you're someone like me that's interested in fitness, interested in staying healthy for a long period of time, if you like working out, there's no better solution than Merrick Health. So I want you to check them out. They offer a turnkey optimization package designed for those driven to maximize performance and support longevity with the most elaborate testing available on the market. So I would recommend you check out Merrick Health. If you're interested, listeners of this program will be getting 10% off at checkout if they use the code GAGNON, GAGNON, at Merrick Health. Again, that's Merrick Health, M-A-R-E-K, health, HEALTH.com/Gagnon, and use the code Gagnon at checkout to save 10%. Take control of your health, go to them, fill out the questionnaire. It's like ordering something off like Uber or like buying something from Amazon. It's just a couple easy clicks and you can get a kit sent to your house, blood work done, and an entire regimen to improve your health. Check them out, merrickhealth.com. Now let's get back to the show.
An interesting story that I have heard nothing about is the way young urban African American people, men mainly, but men and women, are not making the bad or the destructive choices that their parents and grandparents have made with drugs. That is reported not at all. And I believe because it's like a villainized population and it doesn't fit into the stereotype, but you rarely find, and that might have changed in the last few years since I've been kind of out of that. But I was working in Harlem at a harm reduction center up like just 3 years ago. You rarely find young black men and women mainly coming in to receive services there. And I think there was sort of a what I think, I don't know, I'm sure there's sociologists that are writing about it. There was some sort of like communal correction, like the stigma and what they saw with what I believe was a deliberate attack on their community.
Funneling crack into black neighborhoods.
And they saw that and decided to make other choices.
Right. They saw what happened to their parents or their uncle and said, fuck that.
Yeah, but I mean, you tell people who aren't involved, particularly white people who aren't involved in that, they're surprised. I'm starting to see through young friends of mine different explorations within that population, but this is strictly from my observation, but different explorations around drugs, but not those same types of drugs. Cocaine, crack, specifically, and heroin.
Yeah, I mean, I just think stereotypes kind of die hard. You know what I mean? It just takes a little bit to correct what those narratives are. And in one time, sure, there was a lot of drug usage within black neighborhoods, and as that goes down, it just takes generational time for that to catch up. Unfairly. But I do think that's a symptom of narratives that get built, and why it's essential to create narratives that are positive for your community. So I want to talk about Ibogaine a little bit, which I know that you have a bit of a back and forth as far as your history with this substance. So I guess my question is just for everyone that is not familiar, what is Ibogaine?
Okay. Ibogaine is a hydrochloride extract from the Iboga plant. A hydrochloride means just like, I'm going to fuck this up. I'll say it like this. What coca is to cocaine, Ibogaine is to Iboga. So there's a plant in Central Africa, the Iboga plant. And the second layer of the root bark is a powerful drug, medicine, or sacrament. And I want to include all those in depending on how you view it, right? That is at the center, the root bark, not the hydrochloride, not the powder, but I'll get to that, is at the center of a spiritual/religious practice called Bwiti in Central Africa, in Gabon, Equatorial Central Africa, Western Africa. Gabon is home to Iboga and home to Bwiti. Bwiti is the spirituality that grew up around the ingestion of the sacrament, much the way that peyote or mushrooms or ayahuasca has grown up as the central sacrament. And similarly, there is a cultural component that grew up around that, which is the when someone ingests the medicine, that's sort of the performing arts is healing arts, and then an understanding of the pharmacopoeia, the medicines of the surrounding area, in this case, the forest of Central Africa. It's a rich and beautiful tradition, which I can talk a little bit about. But Ibogaine is one hydrochloride from that plant that was found. You got to be careful to use the word discover when you're talking about extracting things from the global south, by white folks finding it, but was found by my friend and mentor, the late Howard Lutzoff, to alleviate and perhaps even eliminate in some cases the symptoms of withdrawal from opioid dependence.
Wow.
With little or no withdrawal for most people. And for some people, a window of opportunity afterwards. With some people, don't have a craving. It also is one of the most powerful psychedelics on the planet. It can last for hours. The initial trip, anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, and then some folks go on longer, but the experience itself could have you on your back for 3 days even.
Wow.
In Central Africa, in Gabon, it's consumed as it's sawdust, basically. Here, the hydrochloride is a white powder. It's still a Schedule 1 drug in the States, but it has been used. Howard Lutzoff found Ibogaine serendipitously. He was strung out on the Lower East Side in the early 60s, and was just taking it because it was a drug, and almost no one had heard of it, and then came out of it. It's a beautiful and long story, but came out of it and realized that he wasn't dependent on it anymore. And then he was this 19-year-old sort of nerdy Jewish kid from the Bronx who decided to start giving it to his other sort of post-beat, pre-hippie scene on the Lower East Side, and the ones who were strung out, and he started to notice this thing, and that's where that movement came from.
Wow.
So that's sort of like an entirely self-led drug users movement.
And then how did you find out about it?
I was living at the Hotel Chelsea in the Lower East Side for many years, and I knew people just sort of involved in which was maybe the last gasp of bohemia for forever. I hope not, but sort of that, I'll just use that word, bohemian culture, and I heard about it through activists, particularly through the work of a guy named Dana Beal, who's I think he just got released from jail again. Hit 77 yesterday. He called me. He's a pot activist, former yippie, but also was really a proponent and madman for this stuff. And his work and other people, and sort of in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a squat scene. There was a scene, sort of an anti-gentrification scene, and an artistic scene happening in the Lower East Side. And there was sort of the myth in the junkie world of this thing, this urban myth. And that's when I first heard it. I first heard it shooting up by my friend Adam Nodelman, the musician who also succumbed to heroin and is not longer with us. But that's when I first heard about it.
So you hear about it, and then when do you do a ceremony or I guess
it was
a healing?
10 years later, man.
10 years later.
Yeah, so I heard about Lower East Side, and then more deaths, and lost track of Adam, and I met Adam through my friend Herbert Hunke, and one of the prototype beatniks. For those of you who know, I would suggest you read his stuff.
And you try to quit cold turkey.
So many times, man.
Yeah.
So many times.
You wake up and you're like, I'm done using it.
Or plan it and go away and take some Valium with you and go and fucking get sick, and then 5 days, 6 days, 2 weeks, starting to feel better, but you would just get back, and then on methadone, off of methadone. I didn't go to too much treatment because I was just too stubborn. I went to like one, but you go to funerals and you're like, I'm done with this. You go to enough funerals. Well, funerals I'd probably do more, and then you know what I mean. And then sometime later, I tried all kinds of stuff.
And what are the treatment options if you're addicted to heroin today?
Today it's a little different.
I mean, methadone is one that people are familiar with. Going cold turkey, which is rarely successful, but you could do that.
Yeah, there's methadone and there's Suboxone, buprenorphine, Subutex, which is all basically the same medicine, which is another maintenance treatment.
Sometimes people get hooked on methadone, though.
Well, it is. You are hooked on methadone. It's kind of look. At first, it was introduced as a detox, but then it became a maintenance. That's the point. I'm not going to be able to do it justice scientifically, but the half-life in the liver lasts longer than a short-acting opioid. So the idea is that you sort of bounce it together and string it out, and it sort of like takes care of that craving. You know, these evil bastards took out that one side effect, euphoria. So it was invented by the Germans, so you could see that. How can we get rid of this euphoria?
Yeah. I mean, what's the point then?
Well, you know, I guess the point is, for some people, it acts as a way to handle the cravings, and they can get back to a normal life, and they can just go and sort of take it. And Subutex and buprenorphine or Suboxone is all the same thing. That you don't even need to go to a clinic. You know, the problem is it's really hard to get off of for some people.
Right.
For most people, it's really hard to get off.
Can you explain what a heroin craving feels like? Like you try to go cold turkey, 7 days goes by. What do you feel?
It's so funny you said that, and I just noticed that there was a craving in the back of my mouth to light the cigar. Okay, it's been a while since I've been there. So, the first, couple of hours, let's say 12 hours in, you start to get what do you call it? Like chicken skin, start to get a little sweaty. And then your stomach starts to go. And then the thing about it, while this is happening, you know that there's one way out, right? And you know what's coming if you don't find that one way out. So, you know, it's been reported, and even there's a book called You Can't Win, written in I think 1890 something, where a guy gets locked up and he's got an opium habit, and it's like way easier because he couldn't get it. But that's what happened whenever I'd get locked up. It would be bad, but you're going to Rikers Island or the Tombs, so there's other shit to worry about, right? Anyways, and there's no chance of release with that. So so that's the beginning, right? And you know it's coming, and then the stomach gives way. You have diarrhea. Your nose starts to run, sneezing, a lot of sneezing and yawning, and then your joints start to hurt, and then just an excruciating. What's happening is, my understanding, I'm probably going to get this wrong scientifically, is that like your opioid receptors are just offline, right? They stop working. So sitting comfortably in a chair, lying down, sleeping is gone. You can't, the things that make it comfortable for me to sit here right now, it would be uncomfortable. I'd be moving myself constantly moving. And then I'm laying in bed, and my stomach is jamming up, and I'm shitting, and I'm puking, and I'm yawning, and I'm sneezing, and there's no comfortable way. There's no sleep. You're not going to sleep for a couple of weeks. And the first 3 to 4 days is going to be that symptom will just keep coming and coming and coming. And then the thing is, after you've gone through it several times of just cold turkey, you're like in the middle of that, and you're like, what the fuck am I doing this for? I'm going to use again. And you know that there's one fucking release. There's one release. And that becomes the challenge. So people go away, and people, you know, there's ways of detoxing with methadone that are easier. There's ways of gradually grinding off of it. And, you know, for sometimes that's successful. I should say that the vast majority of people who have gotten off of opiates have done it without Ibogaine.
Right.
They've done it through other means.
Right. So, but cold turkey just seems brutal. I mean, the amount of willpower.
I probably did it 30, 40 times. So.
And what was the longest that you had gone? Do you remember? Was it like a month? Was it
yeah, something like that. No more than a month in 20-something years.
And you just feel those symptoms. I mean,
the symptoms might go. So what you call a post-acute withdrawal. Post-acute withdrawal would be the symptoms might go, and then, but then there's still an irritability. There's inability. You can't really sleep for a long time. For guys, like you come when the wind blows, basically. So there's a sexual dysfunction, which I think for dudes like sends guys back because they think that's the way it's going to be forever. Like basically someone looks at your dick and you come, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then there's like the bowels don't get back in, and then you get depressed. You know, I mean, there's something physiologically happening, something happening, with trying to get on board. But then there's also the wreckage. It's not like you stop doing dope and your car payment. You get
Right.
a house,
Your
a car.
life is falling apart.
Your life's already falling apart, and for the most cases, and so how to deal with that. So the kind of support that folks need around that is just not really available. Our structure's not really set up for that.
I mean, that is brutal.
Yeah, and what also is not set up for when you have an abstinence only model, as opposed to like this sort of continuum of an idea that change comes in many different forms, right, and in many different ways. If you have just like it's got to be abstinent, and that's problematic too, especially given fentanyl, right?
Yeah.
But because people go out, they might not come back. But if we're talking about that model doesn't seem to work either. We have to recognize that, and this is also difficult to do under prohibition, that there is this is sort of a continuum. You kind of go and come back and go and come back. And if there's a way that we can support folks who have relapsed and try to keep them alive, not just alive to recover, keep them alive because they're human. And if they don't, quote, recover, that's okay too. And we can improve the lives of active drug users. I know this for a fact. But if we can have this continuum of change, I think that would serve not only the individual, it's the humane thing to do, but I think societally it'll be better too.
So then the first time you use Ibogaine, what is that experience like? Like, take me through the whole story. Like, you're at rock bottom,
I'm
life's
at
falling
rock bottom.
apart.
I'm 39 years old. I'm living in my parents' basement. Thank God I live in a codependent culture with Greeks. They're never going to throw you out. They're like, oh, poor Jimmy. He just burnt the entire neighborhood down. It's those other boys that are bad. Anyway, so I was living in the basement. I wake up every morning, want to kill myself. I go to sleep every night, want to kill myself. That's my thoughts. My life, I'm parking cars all day long, $200. I'm in psychosis when I shoot the cocaine, which I'd been in, and then I'd go back to it, which is a whole other thing that, talk about an addiction, the addiction to cocaine, it sort of either smoked or injected. And what happened for me was the insanity that grew out of that.
What do you mean psychosis?
They were at the door, hear the helicopter that wanted to come after me for the $25 of coke I bought, like some crack house.
It was literally like that.
Oh yeah, every fucking time. So I'd go for the rush, and then and then I couldn't stop injecting the coke. You could not stop.
You hear a police siren immediately.
Police siren. I think people's greatest fears would be there. Mine was, I think authorities often, but often the greatest fear, because one guy I used to get high with, his dad would show up. His dad was thousands of miles away. Like a helicopter in Detroit's really going to come for me, for this little bit of
intense paranoia.
Intense paranoia. Then the rush would be so momentarily pleasurable after a while. Look, at first it's great, but so momentarily pleasurable, and then just paranoia and a desire to try to get that rush again. Yeah, it was fucking awful. I was taking methadone on top of it. I was just getting high in the parking lot of the methadone clinic, and they were telling me that you couldn't feel. There's supposedly a point, and for some people it works, but they told me you can't feel high on methadone. I was high as a motherfucker, man, because you're supposed to block the heroin high. So I was just sort of at my wit's end, and I'm Greek American, and I wanted to go to Greece, because I hadn't been in 30 years, and family and friends were constantly going, but I couldn't go with the habit, and then I would just come back and die. So the idea was I would go and I would do Iboga. We found a place in Holland, the great Sarah Glatt. And I would go from there to Greece, and then my plan was just come back and fucking do it,
And the Iboga was the last chance, last thing that could work.
I was just so done, man. I mean, I wasn't writing, I wasn't creating, I wasn't performing, I was just fucking doing drugs,
Purposeless.
Man. Yeah. And so my family scraped together the money. Didn't have a lot of money at the time. And the idea was get me there. I was going to Amsterdam. Back then, Amsterdam was considered mecca for heroin, right? 20-something years ago, that was like The Wire. They talked about Amsterdam. I don't know if you know the show, but like back in the day, that was like because of their decriminalization, right? So anyway, I remember Adam told me, the guy I got high with, Adam told me that there was this lady, Sarah, and I reached out to Dana Beal, who hooked me up with Sarah. Well, actually hooked me up with another mentor, this guy who became my mentor, Richie Glognick, and then they hooked me up with Sarah. And I was going to go to Amsterdam. They're going to give me a couple grand, and my brother's like, "Fuck this! You're going to go to Amsterdam, and you're never coming back, right? We're just going to go and relapse there." So my brother jumped on the plane with me, and I got pissed drunk on the plane because like I'd been on a transatlantic flight or international flight in years, right? I had a passport. I had to do all that shit, right? I just like free fucking alcohol, right? So I shot up. God, I could tell you the time. I shot up. May 21st at noon, Eastern Standard Time was the last time I took a hit of dope and coke, right? Before I got on that plane, before I left for the airport in Detroit. And got on there, got drunk, landed, couldn't even make the phone call. My brother, thank God he was there, he got us in a cab, and we found our way to Sarah's place, and Sarah came out, and it was this sort of beautiful little farmhouse in this Brooklyn. You can say, I don't know, they don't know how to pronounce we know how to pronounce it, Brooklyn, right? But it's spelled the same way. It's a town outside of Amsterdam, and there's a fucking windmill in the back, and this, I thought Sarah would be this blonde woman. It was this little swarthy woman. She looked like she might, she turned out to be Israeli, and she had 6 kids, and hippie, smoking a joint, and her mother was there that kind of looked like my grandmother. So it was kind of cool and weird, and I was kind of drunk, I took my first dose, and a lot of things happened that day, and the first dose is interesting because you take the first dose. They used to do it like this, and I know things have become way more medicalized now, right? So I'm talking about shit because I haven't done this in a while. But the first dose, when I noticed it, because I was in the beginning. Oh, that's the other thing. I was in the beginning of that withdrawal that I was talking about. So I was feeling the stomach ache.
You're fidgeting.
Yeah, the fidgeting, the chicken, the sweating, and like, fuck, I'm here now. Like, what the fuck if this doesn't work? I'm bolted, but my brother's there. My brother's no joke, right? He'd come and get my ass, right? But what I noticed before it became I would say a psychedelic dose was that within 40 minutes, my withdrawal symptoms were alleviated. I didn't have withdrawal. And then I was taken to Daphne's room. Daphne must be she is a grown-ass woman now. God damn, she might be 36 or 7, but she was a teenager. And I was in a teenage girl's room. This kid's running around outside, and there's pictures of pop stars and cute soccer players on the wall in this little girl's bed, and it was dark, and they gave me more, and they increased the dose, and I went on this 3-day fucking journey that I vomited and I shit and I came and I snot every orifice except I don't think I got any earwax out of me, but everything was just coming out of me, right? And it was hellish, and they had to give me more to address the withdrawal, which wouldn't happen if you were. By the way, Iboga and Ibogaine is not only for addiction. In Central Africa, it's used for initiation, but in this case, and she gave me Iboga, which is unusual in the detox world, but she had access to something called, it was a type of Iboga, Indra, which is a different kind of extract. But I went on this 3-day journey in that dark room. I was trying to count the sunrises and sunsets, and I lost count. I didn't know how long I was in there for. I didn't eat the whole time. They were making sure I had water, and they were checking on me and taking care of me. Every so often my brother would come by, he was staying at a hotel nearby. But in that process, I had fucking deep visions.
Where'd you go?
I went back through my life. I was able to I was walking in there with the belief that I had that I was responsible for my common law wife's death and my baby's death, right? My unborn kid. And I realized I wasn't. It wasn't even a vision. It was just that's not me, right? I did see her. I saw all kinds of my dead friends. They, at one point, filled the room. They were just coming and coming and coming. And I went back to my childhood. I got to explore my relationships. And then I went backwards, back into my ancestral history. I had no idea that the Bwiti, the spirituality from Gabon, was like many African spiritualities, is one that is heavily concerned with the ancestors and healing of lineages. But I went way back, you know. And by the way, I was on my way to Greece too in 10 days. So it's kind of, so I went way back, and I went back to my grandmother. I went back to be a kid in Detroit, and I saw her, and I saw my other grandmother, and I could smell their food. And then I went further back to where I was with some ancestors, and there was just this. This is where this begins to get weird, but my life got weirder after that, and it was already pretty weird. But there was an idea, a presence of a matriarch. From my mom's side, which was in the Peloponnese, different from the island I went to, and that she was in the dirt. She's been dead. And the words, dead so long, the earth's gone through you, dead so long, the earth's gone through you. It was just repeated like this mantra where you become to earth. And there was something about that became this, and the meaning of that has changed for me over time, but but it was comforting. And then I went forward. I'm saying this like it's a linear thing. It's not. It's all happening at once and not at all. And sometimes I'm just lying there going, what the fuck? I went forward and I saw what my life would be. I saw that I would be engaged in this type of thing. I saw that I would be on This American Life. Very peculiar.
Specifically?
Yeah. I used to listen to it and shoot dope on Sundays when I would get a cop. But I thought, I'm going to be on This American Life. I saw the image of this guy, this older black man that was in the jungle, and in a forest, I should say, with a beard and piercing eyes. And I met him. And I knew that I was going to do that work. And that's not unique. A lot of people that go through the experience want to work with it, but I knew I would.
Wow.
And then, the other thing was that there was, fucking canals everywhere. So at night, the sound of frogs would be deafening, and there was this hours where they became this frog orgy. And so it was just it was this tambourine, and it was just this Hieronymus Bosch, fucking frog orgy that I was in for hours. So that was one thing. I went to a frog orgy. That was part of the deal, I guess. I came out of that, and there's a thing called Iboga coincidence, Ibogaine coincidence. I didn't say this. When I was going in, I mentioned Adam, who I thought was dead, who was kind of like a little brother to me, the guy who told me about it. And Sarah said, he'll be here in 2 days. So I came out, Adam was there to do another treatment. Then Adam went through his thing, and eventually we went running around Amsterdam because he had lived there as a squatter and as a musician before. But I came out of it day 3. I could never ask for that again. I tell the story a lot, but I actually get moved every time I tell the story, right? Because I don't think that I can never expect that again in life. The absolute freedom. And as I'm saying this, I'm hesitating because I'm telling a story that there's somebody out there who's suffering greatly right now. And this might prompt them, as my story has in the past, to go out and seek the treatment. And the reason I'm hesitating is because what I discovered is that's not what happened with everybody. And we reinforce brokenness when we try to do a one-size-fits-all. So people would see Dimitri and wow, man, that's it. I need it. I need this. And then they come and something else happens. Because I should also say I went to Greece for 3 months after. And I spent the time in the village. So there was that moment when I came out and I walked out and everyone was sleeping. And I kind of somehow I I literally washed the shit off of me. I mean, they were taking good care of me, but and shit coming, like, you know, I mean, like everything came out of me, right? And I went for a walk in the morning dew, like, and I fell at one point because I'm walking in the back of the joint, like there's like these, and you think it's like flat ground. Like I've been in Detroit, New York, I haven't walked on anything but fucking concrete for fucking 40 years, right? And I tripped and I fell in the dew, and like I had euros in my pocket and they went scattering and there were geese, and then just laughed, and I got up out of there and I went in and I sat down on the couch and I was sitting there and I was just praising God. You know, one of the other things that happened was, you know, my lineage, you know, which is Greek Orthodoxy, right? Not that I'm a big churchgoer or anything, but like I believe my entire quest for drugs was a spiritual quest as well, right? I was very much looking for God and thinking about God, and for me it manifested, and I think it's just a manifestation for the individual, but for me it was in the sort of the revolutionary image of Christ, right? The forgiving image of Christ. And I was just sitting there in the living room saying, praise God, and just crying and laughing. And the little girl who was one of the daughters, who was this little sassy girl, she said, oh, there was a black man from a place called the Bronx who was saying the same thing last week. And so, you know, this idea of just being, actually the idea of grace, when I look up the word grace, like this unmerited help from God, this is help from God. And, you know, Adam came and we went and we ran around Holland for a few days, and then I made my way to Greece. But I spent 3 months in the village where my grandmother was from, which I think was as much a part of the healing as anything. So I had the privilege to do that.
Wow.
You know.
So now, was the relief immediate? Like the next 4 or 5 days, were you in any way itching for another?
I was not.
Shoot?
Look, I was not. I was with Adam, who knew every cop spot in Holland. I had money in my pocket. There was no locks on the door, and I didn't have any desire. I still don't have a desire. I mean, yeah, you know, man, I've worked in needle exchange. People have given me their heroin after we were detoxing. I've watched people shoot up. I have never had a strong desire to use those drugs again. But that isn't the case with everybody. Right. You know, after working with 500 people in this and then seeing the trajectory, most people relapse, right? And that's the problem with the way it's being presented. It's being presented as a sort of an abstinence-only model, and I think that we can really hurt people by doing that. People who come out and have a different relationship with the world or with their drug, or just go in and heal something and then go back to dope. I mean, that's not a bad thing either. If someone can resolve or begin to resolve, some sort of pain or trauma, or forgive themselves or take accountability for something they've done, forgive or take accountability, which, and I think that's valuable too. But I think what we're missing with the whole psychedelic movement is we're looking for this one-size-fits-all cure. And there's some other problems with bringing it into this structure. But for me, that's what happened for me. And because I have this gift, this is my gift right now, right, man? We're talking, I talk. That's what I do, part of it. And then it turns out I had a gift for holding people in a way towards healing, right? But because I had this gift, I used it, and I became a proponent for Iboga. But I'm not a proponent for any type of treatment. I'm a proponent for see if we could change the structure in which we do all these things. And I think psychedelics can still do that, but they won't do it by itself. We have to have the intention to change.
Actually, Dimitri, do you mind if I just take my Magic Mind? This is a supplement I take in the morning with my coffee that just keeps me alert. I actually feel like it extends the life of my coffee for the entire day.
Okay, all right.
It's got all sorts of good stuff in it. Nothing that you would partake in. There's no heroin in here, but it's got ashwagandha. It's got lion's mane, a bunch of other good supplements, and it actually tastes delicious, which is super nice. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about this. So go ahead.
And so I went to Greece. I didn't have a job. I had a little bit of money. My family does not have a lot of money, but I could stay in Greece for pretty cheap, stay at some cousin's house while they were gone. I I didn't have a car payment. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have children. I didn't have a wife. You know, I was sort of like, I could just do whatever, right? You know, and fucking, and frankly, you know, I'm white passing man in America, right? So like, you know,
Wow.
and the privilege of that, right? So what I did was, as an act of radical services, I went back to Detroit. I did some stuff I've done with my brother before, like some promotion shit, did some house nights and stuff like that, and some music nights and shit like that, and I started writing again, and then I was just preparing to come back and start just bring this to the world, and I did it completely out in the open, even though it was a felony, which eventually, the day that I said this is the last treatment I'm doing, DEA came for me,
No
but
way.
that was like 10 years later, yeah.
Wow.
But I did it in a real public way because I was concerned with changing the law. And I'm not that concerned with that anymore. I just, I mean, I'm concerned. I think drugs should be legal, but I think, you know, I'm an anarcho communist, you know, and so I kind of, you know, I mean, that's just one thing that should be sort of up to us as in the community, right? But I sort of made that my focus. Did a lot of work in around a lot of work. I was in the drug policy world. I didn't do a lot of work, and then I also started working in harm reduction, which was the other thing that really changed my life was harm reduction. Before all that, I would never have gotten to the Iboga if there wasn't people, you know, if there wasn't the guys in 1991 from ACT UP, which was the queer. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they were like these militant queer folks who wanted to change access to syringe laws and develop medicines. And I just walked up on a corner where I used to get my works, and these gay guys were standing there with a table, and I knew what ACT UP was, and they had these bags of syringes. And I used to get my works there. That they were often used works. When I mean works, I mean syringes. You know, I would open up the package and then squeeze it, and a little water would come out, right? And this is a time when, like, Russian roulette. I don't know how I missed it. I don't know how I dodged it, but I dodged it because I met these folks.
Wow.
And what they did is they handed me a bag of syringes with information. And when I asked them how much, they said it's free. And when I suspiciously asked why, they said, we want you to be safe. And man, I was like a pariah at that moment. You know what I mean? No one wanted to deal with me. And the fact that was an act of love. And so what Sarah did for me and what those people did for me, that was like my motivation to go into the world. So that became my work, and that became also. There was a film made. They're making the second part now, but the filmmaker said, my buddy Michel Negroponte, in his narration of "I'm Dangerous with Love," said, Dimitri used to front a band. Now he fronts an exotic plant, and that was kind of what was happening for a while.
Wow. Yeah. And so, how many people did you end up treating with Iboga?
I estimate around 500 people.
And can you estimate what percentage of them were in recovery for a long period of time, or I guess recovered for a long period of time, or just kicked it cleanly like you did?
I would say somewhere between 10 and 20%. So, I mean, look, I could look at it like, actually, man, if I start to look at it just as that's the only result, then we're all going to be failures. It's like looking at death as a failure, right? It's like looking at, you know, man, like, you know, I didn't smoke any cigars until 3 days ago. Is that a failure? I'm going to puff one now, right. Especially since you've triggered me so much. but no. So I would say this, man. What psychedelics do, especially Iboga, because it takes so long, but what psychedelics offer, their greatest feature to me, because it's resistance towards capitalism, the greatest feature is they're not efficacious, in that if you do it right, you're going to spend a lot of time with somebody. If you do it right, you're not going to be that doctor that just wrote that script to that guy standing up in front of the 7-Eleven, right? You're going to have to pay attention and be with somebody and then honor them. And that's when the ceremonial aspect came to me, man. This is an opportunity to hold people as precious, to hold people and to make it about them. And so if the majority of those 500 people or so felt held, felt seen, felt loved, felt in a competent way, then that's it, man. That's the fucking success. And the fact that I was able to do that is an incredible gift for me.
How were you getting access to the Iboga when you were doing your ceremonies?
Man, I was a dopey. I'll get some Iboga today. I mean,
You just had plugs and people.
Yeah. And then there was also, we did this project where we came to New York. Like, I was dying to do it, but I had this guy, Richie Oglognek, who is like one of the unsung heroes of Iboga, who had used to call him Frankie 3 names because he had different names, and we were walking around with all these burner phones, and it was so wild because we were trying to get like people off of dope, but we were just acting like dope dealers, right? Which is part of what I liked, right? Because I dug that. That's where I came from. I liked, you know what I mean? I was younger and even crazier than I am now. Richie was like, go, I know you want to do that. A lot of people want to do this. Go and have a normal life for at least 1 year. He said, get into treatment. If you want to go to meetings, have a job, have your own car, be living by yourself. Be like a fucking human being, right? Before you go out and try to treat somebody else. And 1 year is like, I'd realize now, like the bare minimum. So that's what I did. And then he had this insane, great, wonderful, mad project to go and do this thing in New York, which I wanted to get back to New York. I was in Detroit. I wanted to come back. This is where the place, I love this place.
Wow.
And we were going to do this thing where we're just going to be out. We passed out flyers, and he was going to trade, I don't know, something like, it's a crazy number, like 20 what they call providers, and then we were going to treat hundreds of people for like almost nothing. It didn't become 20, it became like 5, and we treated probably in that summer, I don't know, maybe we treated 50 people for nothing, but we did it with flyers. This is before like, social media. We stand out in front of a methadone clinic with a flyer that said methadone is slavery in Harlem, and like this huge line of people. And then we had an 800 number, and we'd be literally at Grand Central Station passing up, basically like, hey, we're committed to felony, call this 800 number. We had a website, and we just did it. And he was training me as it was going, and it was chaotic and insane. And that's what started my practice in New York, and then I eventually moved here with my then wife.
Wow.
And
when did you go to Gabon for the first time?
I guess it maybe 18 years ago.
Okay, so this is like a couple years after.
I was an Ibogaine provider, and I was hungry to go there.
And why did you go there specifically, and what did you seek to learn from them?
It was a point where there was some near deaths. Because, by the way, Iboga's risky, especially if you do it in a hotel room. I would always make sure that I had the EKGs and that kind of shit checked out by a medical professional. And then after a couple of years, I'd always make sure there was someone who could start a heart with me, right? A nurse practitioner, at least an EMT, somebody who would keep the heart going until someone else came. So we had a lot of setbacks, and Michel Negroponte was making the film I'm Dangerous with Love, and he suggested that, maybe we go and ask the Bwiti. And I've been dreaming about going. I started to really get into the music. And I went because it was offered. The other thing about my life is that I never traveled. So what happened as I became this harm reduction, I started to create holistic spaces for people, active drug users, and so I was a harm reduction person, and there was also this early proponent, not early, but 20-something, second generation of Ibogaine people, in the States. So I traveled a lot, and I would go anywhere. I'd go to New Jersey. I was on the road, which was great. I traveled, I don't know, to like 30, 40 countries, something like that. And so the idea to go to Gabon, which is at the center of this, and the music was really interesting to me as a musician. So I went there just to see and to learn and to be initiated. And it was a deeply impactful experience for me.
Wow. And so what were the people like that you were with that were using the Iboga in this ceremonial way? Were they just like standard Gabonese people? Is that
they were Gabonese people. Gabon is Gabon is a colonial distinction, right? Mm-hmm. These are people of that center, and so that happens to be Gabon and Democratic Republic of Congo and Cameroon oh, I'm gonna fuck it up. Anyways, some other countries. I'm blanking on the name. One of the Guineas. I forget which one. But anyway,
Guinea-Bissau.
Guinea-Bissau. Yeah. And there's Papa, and I always confuse them. Yeah. Guinea. Yeah.
Interesting. So you went there, and these were these like more rural, like rural folks that were specifically using this type of thing in ceremonial ways? Like, can you break down the social structure of how they were
as
using
much as I can? And again, I ask for forgiveness for people who know more than I do, way more than I do about this. So I'll do it as best I can.
We're really popular in Gabon. So
they'll look me up and track me down, and I'll get some comments like, you fucked this up and that up, and that's okay. I'm here to learn. All right. What I know is that the root bark, the root grows in Gabon. That the first people to consume it were the forest people, sometimes known as pygmies. The pygmies were the holders of Iboga. My understanding was that these forest people have consumed it for, the fossil records go back 7,000 years, so it's longer, right? And then maybe 600 or 700 years ago, Bantu people, which are most African Americans have Bantu blood. Bantu people fled savannah folks from that area, fled Abrahamic persecution for their sort of fetish beliefs, meaning the use of objects to change the material plane.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
So a fetish, you got to have a fetish somewhere in this joint, man. You got so much shit here. A fetish is just that Marx talks about commodity fetishism. And so I'll just give a plug for Marx as we're into this, right? So like the idea that he said the only way you can talk about commodities is through the language of religion. So a fetish, like the classic voodoo doll, like that's a fetish, right? The idea that you can do something to this doll and it's going to create a change, like through an object will create a change in the world. Just Marx said that just money is a fetish, right? There's it's a piece of paper, but there's a belief in it that can make the material world change. And if there's a belief structure around it, you can actually see the change. That's proof to me that fetish works. Okay, so these were folks that were in traditional beliefs, right? And they were being persecuted. So they fled the Abrahamics, which were the Christians and the Muslims, and they got to the forest, and they encountered the indigenous people, which are the pygmy people, who took them in and showed them how to live. Very similar to some of the stories we hear about, folks fleeing religious persecution and coming here, people from England and Holland. It wasn't as a catastrophe for the forest people as it was for indigenous people here. But they suffered too because of the clash between sort of nomadic people and more village people. Anyways, that's another story. So as they learned about the way to survive, they were also introduced to this medicine, Iboga. My understanding, and it's limited, and I ask for forgiveness again, my understanding is that this syncretic spirituality developed, where the pantheon of the savannah people, the Bantu people, mixed with the animist religion of the forest people, the belief that the entire forest is alive, and also their incredible skill as healers with the pharmacopoeia of the forest. And then that turned into ritual, and those rituals developed over the 600 to 700 years, bringing in different ethnic groups. Because a place like Gabon with 1 million something, when people say Africa, well, even when you say Europe, you don't realize how many different people occupy these continents, let alone a place the size of Colorado. These are different people. These are different ethnic groups that are living there. So 50 languages or something is spoken in a place of just over 1 million. So as Bwiti spread, people brought their own beliefs in it, and there's different. It did what people do. It splintered and grew, and this beautiful plasticity that is human and the creation sort of created and flourished in all these different kinds of Bwiti. So there is like peyote. I think I said this already, but I'll go over it again. Like peyote, like ayahuasca, Iboga is the central sacrament. The performing arts is healing arts, singing, and in this case, dance. There's certain types of Bwiti that can actually, I say it because I believe it, but they say, I believe it because I've seen it, can heal someone through dancing. I think it's called gondo. I'm going to mess it up, so I won't. But in the south of Gabon, they practice. But so dance, the painting of the body, music, incredible music, and storytelling. All this stuff is part of the healing. And then the cornucopia of the cornucopia of the forest, all the different healing plants and baths. And so when you walk with a Gabonese healer, with a Bwiti healer, like I would with my teacher Papa Andre, who I saw in Holland. I met him in a town called Jerusalem. He would be picking out that plant for Elizabeth and that plant for Pierre. And, he's got this ailment. There's all kinds of stuff, of course, to get it up, right? So this one and that one, because dudes are looking for it, right? So this incredible rich tradition. And so what I saw, I went with a film with Michelle, who was filming. So, okay, there's that. And I went for authenticity, which A, is impossible. I'm a white guy with another white guy with a fucking camera coming looking for authenticity, right?
Yeah.
And I just wanted to learn. I wanted to see if there was something that I could learn from this. And so when I got there, the first person, Michelle Negroponte arranged for for our guide, our person, this guy Tatayo, who was this French hippie, and I was like, fuck this French hippie. I don't want this white guy, fucking French hippie. And when I got off the plane, I realized that I had found my long lost twin brother. He had been there. He's been there now for 50 something years. He speaks Fang, which is one ethnic group that, and he had this compound, and I didn't want to really do it in that compound. And so he took us around Gabon, and we talked to several people, not deep into the south, but we went traveling. And I went into Jerusalem, and I saw Papa Andre, and he ended up leading my ceremony. And it was kind of perfect to do it with a hippie the first time I went, because he brings all the different ethnic groups into his compound. And it's not perfect, and it's chaotic, and it's wonderful, and it's... but Papa Andre, who was the elder of that other village, came, and Mama Lucy, his wife. And I was, this was the second time I tripped on a massive dose of Iboga. But I'll say this is what struck me, is that there was the music that I love, which is at some point the core of the music that I love it's Africa. So I could hear the blues, I could hear modern jazz, I could hear house, because it was this repetitive sort of trance-like
rhythmic
music.
drumming.
Yeah, drumming, or actually the pounding. Excuse me. The drumming doesn't really happen until after initiation, depending on the type of Bwiti, and there's many types of Bwiti, but there's a big stick, not a stick, like a plank that's held by rocks on both sides, and two percussionists sit on both, hit it with sticks, like right behind your head, while they play this harp. And, well, I'll get to that in a second, but what I saw was that there was the music I love, or the roots of the music I love, this, and then there was the sacrament, which was a drug, which someone was taking in the middle, but like everyone in the village, from the little girls to the old people to the dogs, were taking it as well in smaller doses. And there was dancing, and it wasn't without drama and hierarchy and all the shit, because it's people, but there was this beauty that I had seen in the house scene and in other scenes, and this collectivism and this way of getting somebody over. And I started to understand something about ceremony and the way that I had been doing it back home was, the way it was given to me, just a black room and just a lot of love and care, but that it was really similar to what I saw when I was a performer, space holding, when I was a bartender, when I ran after hours clubs, and then eventually when I was an organizer and creating spaces for active drug users. There is, to me, that's the most important thing, was the space that is created. So there was this incredible space that they created. And that started to change the way I did my practice. And, for me to undergo it from that dark room when I was kicking heroin to just an initiatory practices with all the preparation, with bathing and ritual and and what anything would signify and what it meant, it was incredible. It was an incredible experience. I had another deep trip, but beyond a trip, because I was surrounded by fires and people playing music and singing and dancing, and people are painted, and it was profound, and it changed me, and it changed the way I started to do my practice. I started to see if I could bring that back. And in some ways, for some time, I was trying to replicate it. I wasn't initiating anybody because I didn't have the authority to initiate. I continued to use Ibogaine, which is not Iboga, but I would see how much of that practice I could bring back to make sense for people. So we'd go to the forest before, we'd go to a park, and we'd just be like talking to the nature, and we're talking to the ancestors, and we're looking for an ancestral cure or an ancestral healing. And I brought aspects of the baths, and sometimes we replicated the way the thing looked. And I did that for a while. And then I started to change away from that. And I started to move away from Iboga after my arrest. But why I left, because I'm not from Gabon. I'm a Greek boy from Detroit. And there are traditions here that I can use. So like in Cardea, first time I fucking said my business in a fucking, I'm really good, right? Cardea. Cardea is like sort of right now where I am in sort of this, I guess, evolution. I was trying to use some aspects of Bwiti or the influence of Bwiti to contextualize the experience. And I think it was successful, the experience of the detox, right? And then what happened is I sort of started getting away from, stopped after my arrest. I continued for a little while, but then I saw that it was problematic to work with Iboga the way I was working with it as this sort of cure to addiction, because I didn't see that happening. I saw that something else was happening. And then I also got burnt out. And I started working with other medicines like MDMA and psilocybin and now ketamine. And what I realized was that what the Bwiti were doing and what Shipibo are doing, just on a real basis, is they're creating the space. So that's what really fucking interests me. What you did here is you created a space, right? When you go into a nightclub, there's a space created there, and it's going to affect the way that the thing goes, right? Mm-hmm. So you adapt to the space that you're in, you adapt to the club, you adapt to the acoustics.
And comedy is the most sensitive thing to this, in my opinion. Like, that is the most space precious thing in my estimation that any art form could be. That the space is so fundamental for how the art form works.
Yeah.
You need, the ceilings can't be high. This audio can't be coming from behind you. The audience has to all be collectivized in a very intimate way. They all have to be very close. They can't be too comfortable. The temperature can't be too hot or too cold. I would actually rather it be a little colder, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And there's so many little things. The lights have to be just so. If it's too bright, it won't work. Like, comedy outdoors doesn't work. Like, there's so many specific little things to create the space for the thing to work.
And that's it, man. That's it. That's what interests me most. That's what interests me way more than any of the drugs. So how do we create a container? You just described a container in which you can for the best reception, and then within that you're attuned to the audience. Yeah, You don't walk in and do the exact same way and the exact same thing. You're improving, right? And you're attuned to the audience and you're feeling the vibe. And there's something that you can't explain other than you've just been doing the work. And so that's where it gets to be. I get worried about both the sort of toxic hierarchy of tradition and the toxic hierarchy of the medical profession. And so the way I contextualize it now, I'm really grateful for the Bui tea. I went through 3 levels of initiation. I am not a spokesman for Bui tea. I am not a good student of it.
You're not black yet.
I'm not black yet. I'm just yeah, exactly, man. I'm just, and I've respectfully, with great deal, distanced myself for a long time, for over 10 years, and I learned so much. I changed so much. I grew so much with what I learned there. And then I realized that there is a culture here that comedy is a part of, because it's particularly an American art form. Mm-hmm. Jazz and comedy, right?
Mm-hmm. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because we got to talk about your amazing dick game. Yes, you right now, listen to my voice, my deep, soothing voice. You have an amazing dick game. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you know someone with an amazing dick game. Maybe you got a boyfriend. Who knows? But if you have an amazing dick game, there's a way that you can make it better. And that's with the good people over at Blue Chew. Mm-hmm. Blue Chew is an amazing service that basically delivers a chewable tablet that has the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, all that stuff, but this is the chew. It's at a fraction of a cost, and it's never been easier to get your hands on the greatest dick game of your life. Mm-hmm. Never been easier. I'm telling you. You can go to bluechew.com and you can submit all your information to a licensed person, a legit person that will then mail you a discreet, very unassuming, but very, very powerful package. You know what I'm talking about? The powerful package to your home. That's how easy it is. You don't got to go talk to a doctor and be like, yeah, I want, nope, easy. You got to just go on the internet. Yo, bluechew.com. I want to get the best dick given of my life. And that's how you do it. Easy as that. And for the listeners of this show, of this program, you are going to get free first month of Blue Chew. Mm-hmm. You're going to be getting Blue Chew for free. All you got to do is pay $5 shipping. That's a cup of coffee. Black to be delivering that BBC. You know what I'm saying? That's bluechew.com, BLUECHEW.com. Use the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON, and receive your first month for free. That's bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And thank you so much, Blue Chew. I'm telling you, man, check out this product. Even if you're one of these people that's like, I don't know, I don't really need it. What are you talking about? It could be better. It can always be better. Let's say you're in the 1%, you're about to be in the 0.01% with Blue Chew. Now let's get back to the show.
So I say Cardea, and the work I did underground for years after that. Cardea is, it's not medicalized, but it's medically supported. I'm going to check with the doctor, right? I'm going to check, if you're on meds, we're going to figure that out. We're going to talk to medical professionals, but it's not a medical process, right? And we're not following in a sort of orthodox tradition of the traditional holders of these medicines, although we are recipients and we're grateful for their knowledge. So we're not from Johns Hopkins, and we're not from the forest or the Pueblo. At least I'm not. What we are is from the comedy space, the dance floor, the theater, the book, the gallery, the podium, the podcast. We're from the good things about modernity, and that's about being forced to create ourselves. Mm. You're forced to create yourself as the son of a, working class French Canadian, right? You're forced to recreate yourself, or you're going to have, or you can just be confused, right? So you're creating yourself. Mm-hmm. That's a really scary proposition. And so how do we navigate that? And how do we help folks navigate that? And I think I call it ceremony because it's a big fucking deal. It's separate from everything else. But what I do it's not coming from any particular tradition except for our own. So when I think about my cultural ancestors, I mean, Jimi Hendrix is over there, right? Stanley Kubrick is over there. more Jimi Hendrix, right? I mean, well, Houdini's over there. You know, these are like cultural icons, right? I think of, so I think about Lenny Bruce, right? I think about Coltrane, right? And then we have this ceremonial form, which means there's a beginning, a middle, and end, and we're going to honor the person, and we're going to. So I use vibrational instruments. We use voice. There's sound is what carries it, right? So I'm back to fronting a band again, right? And I play with extraordinary space holders and musicians. But the idea is that we have to be improvisational. So a good therapist is an improv. You have to be improvisational. We have to be in tuned. And so that's the job. And the most important thing is the relationship between the person providing it and the person receiving it in terms of trust and the ability to be plastic and changeable in that space.
Can music literally heal people?
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain how that works or how you've seen it work? Can you give an example of how you've seen it work?
One good thing about music, when it hits you, feel no pain. That's what Marley said. I think that I say yeah, just like that, but it's not a scientific thing, right? And I'm not going to be able to speak about it as music opens up the space for. It opens up the space. Sun Ra said space is the place. So if we're talking about space, we have the psychedelic drug, or ketamine, or Iboga, or whatever it is, and to me, there's the possibility, if done sort of in a dark space or with an eye mask in a comfortable space, that it can create space inside of you, right? Or it can create perspective, right? And the idea is, and sometimes that perspective is right here, right? And there's an idea that, like, you're coming in with rumination or guilt or whatever, it might be right here. And that might be helpful, but sometimes, and you can work with that, but so the medicine itself can do that or start to create this expansive space, right? And then the sound done well can create that space, can make something come up here or make it come way out there, right? And we can, and then the way people are held, maybe they can have some freedom. When I mean held, the way that they're being watched over and cared for can make the freedom to navigate within that and through that perspective and through that maybe healing. So that's what we're doing. We're not performers, but we are in some ways performers, right? And so,
could you give an example of something that was healed with someone, just in your experience, where there's music involved, and would these typically be like psychological or mental health things, or are there physical healings that could be done as well?
Well, I hesitate to say healed. I can say I've seen, because then again, we're coming up with a linear approach to, like, we're coming in to do this. But people have expressed in the sound something moving in them, and, a release from guilt or shame. I mean, shit. I'm so blessed, man, because, like, I get to witness this shit on a regular, but it's really important that we don't say you're coming in to do this and this happens. But there's someone who was at the ketamine space just a few days ago, and we were doing group ketamine at Cardea, and I was playing, and this is a woman, I imagine in her late 40s or early 50s, successful woman. She came out and we were having tea and fruit and stuff, and she just said, that's what was created there with the live sound, with the vibrational instrument, in this case, ketamine. I just forgave my parents. And that was just on a Sunday afternoon. I often see that happen, right? People who have been able to contextualize, and often it's just a contextualizing, because we're not going to heal it's not going away, like a scar is not going away, right? So this idea that you're going to take MDMA or some psychedelics and then PTSD from having been exposed to or committed some sort of evil, right, is just going to be done. It would be a relationship with that. So the sound can be part of that catalyst. It's not like coming in and buzzing at a certain frequency and then your brain, it might be, I don't fucking know. But what's happening is the space opens up and something new happens. You do that. That's what art does too. Like, it's like when you go to a museum, a painting can change you, right? The first time I always saw the self-portrait by Otto Dix and he tried to do art, something happened. I was changed. Or a Vermeer in Holland, right? Or the first time I saw Iggy Pop, something changed. Now, did I walk around just changed? No, I walked around with deep pain and sorrow and addiction and all kinds of other shit. But there was some change that I could refer to, maybe not. Same thing happens in comedy. What's happening? You come up on stage, you're fucking thinking like a healer. You're thinking like a shaman. You're thinking like someone who holds space. Like, where's the sound coming from? How cold is it? How high is the, how's the light hitting me? Where's the light, how, they're not too comfortable. You're trying to create the optimal space. And then you're using words. You're using words and lights and sound and maybe even smell to change somebody. Something will be changed. You're affecting a physical reaction from people and something will be changed. Often comedy is some of the most healing shit there is. And also, you seem incredibly well balanced for a comedian, by the way.
I appreciate that.
What the fuck? I mean, you see,
Maybe I'm not a good comedian. Maybe that's the problem.
I'm gonna hold out that you don't have to be a neurotic mess to be a comedian, but I've never met one. But it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm neurotic in a different way. I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I keep it under wraps.
But also, yeah, I mean, also often it comes from people who are deeply fucking damaged, and that's me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So can you talk to me about MDMA and psilocybin therapies and how you sort of integrate those and what the outcomes from those have been?
So I stopped doing underground work because of my company, but so I'm only working with ketamine and psilocybin. So I could talk about MDMA. So,
In the past, have you used MDMA?
Yeah, I've used it in combination with psilocybin, which I think will be used more and more.
Really?
I mean, the underground does stuff before people research it.
Sure.
The idea behind it is that there's a sort of a base of MDMA and can sort of maybe buffer or act as a base for the experience of the psilocybin. But what we do with psilocybin in the psilocybin retreats in Jamaica and soon in Costa Rica is it's a week-long retreat. My partner Ross Ellenhorn is a therapist and sociologist, and he's written several books. You should get him in here. I think you'd probably like him. He's written several books on play and change, but serious play and creating the plasticity for curiosity, basically. So the work that we do in Jamaica, it is a retreat, so it's not. We're very suspicious of a lot of the claims made that it's going to cure anything, but we're also suspicious of folks coming to do deep healing work from serious conditions. So I wouldn't go to a retreat to sort of unpack early childhood sexual trauma for the first time. It's not a retreat setting. So what we do there, this is for folks who want to sort of expand and explore. It's not a diagnosable, it doesn't require a diagnosis, and we want to be really careful that folks aren't going to unlock something on a week in Jamaica experience and not be able to like hold, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do in Jamaica is we do a version of what we've done, in the ketamine space, and what I've done for years now. I work with our director of sound and music is John McLean. His professional name is Juan McLean. He's a DJ and music producer. So we work with John and whoever the other space holders / artists are, and we create an environment of immersion in sound. Play for 4 to 6 hours of continual live sound, starting with vibrational instruments and vocals and maybe 30 instruments in total. And then that's combined with the creation that Ross Ellenhorn sort of beautifully has created this model of creativity to sort of, for the actual making of art, for not capital A artists, for just all of us to sort of creation and getting more plastic and playful. So 3 ceremonies combined with these other activities in an incredibly beautiful surroundings, which has been transformative for a lot of folks.
And do different drugs function differently for different types of problems? Like,
Yeah.
why would someone be better off doing ketamine versus psilocybin?
So the most obvious thing, if someone wants to get off of opiates or at least go through a detox, Iboga can provide that, Ibogaine. So there are people who could talk and would be more animate about what each drug does. There are certain indications for people who shouldn't do some drugs, but I'm not that person. I'm a space holder. And, there's some people who are just experiencing psychosis or who are not prepared that I would stir them away from that, or maybe they're opening something up that doesn't need to be open right now. They need to build a safe container of self before they open it, right? So I believe that space is the place. So, but there's studies on all that kind of stuff, and we'll see more. And I'm resistant to it, actually. But I will say that ketamine, and I had my prejudice against ketamine just because of where it's from and my history of ketamine. If you come to our ketamine clinic, we're only going to you need to see a doctor, and he or she will decide. Our doctors will decide, or our clinicians will decide whether it's a good idea for you. You do need a diagnosis. Ketamine is only a couple of hours. We extend that, which I like. Sometimes a visit there is 3 hours. People are welcome to stay longer. Our space is this incredibly curated space by this brilliant Randy Palumbo. It's literally made of mushrooms and really beautiful space. And our clinicians, Jill and Zach Reich, are just amazing clinicians, and the team's amazing. But ketamine, a couple things. Most of these psychedelics, you need to be off SSRIs or antidepressants.
Right.
There's counterindications that are dangerous for some of them, or the drug simply won't work. That's not the case with ketamine, which makes it for people who are experiencing extreme events of mood or mind or some diagnosable event. It makes it far more accessible, right? So there's that. Then there is the time that it takes to do ketamine. You can come in at noon and be out the door by 2:30, 3 o'clock. In our case, we invite people to stay for as long as they want. And then there's, for some people, sort of an immediate, or not immediate, for some people, I don't want to put expectation, there is a noticeable effect in terms of rumination or intractable sadness or whatever it is. Not for everybody. What we believe, again, is that the space holding is paramount. We don't like to make the claims that other people are making. That couple that I met around the corner, this lady really wanted me to tell her that it was going to fix her phobia. And she was quoting MAPS, which is the big psychedelic proponents, which have done great work. But I think what happens is the message gets reduced to a simple sort of meme. And so we're not going to say that. We're not going to say that this is absolutely going to remove suicidal ideation. But what we want to do, and that's different from the retreats, we want to make sure that you at least have someone to hold you afterward, whether that is a therapist, whether that is a 12-step community, a synagogue or a mosque or a priest or whoever, that somebody that can hold you in this journey afterwards is really super important. And our job is to be the best space holders we can in the spaces. So we have great clinicians, and then we play live sound or the recorded stuff we make there. That Juan McLean has made that, and we believe that still we bring that artistic approach. And there's also in our group stuff we create art together. And
but if someone was interested hypothetically and they were like, oh, I might be feeling those feelings of anxiety, or maybe I have depression, or maybe I occasionally have suicidal ideation, and I wanted to see if psilocybin could be beneficial for me, and they don't have the ability or access to get to a clinic, but they're able to get their hands on psilocybin. what would you say in terms of them creating a space for themselves in order to actually do healing work? And again, this is excluding someone that wants to just like have a good time or see something cool, assuming that people are not doing it for the wrong intentions, but they have a real pain. They would like to try and see if this could be a solution for them. What would be your, profile for who could use it?
Okay, cool.
And then how can they use it?
But first I have to say that recreation and having a good time and fucking on psychedelics is not the wrong reason. Some people, that's great. It could be great, but okay. Okay, so you can do basic work and understand what is counterindicated, right? So sometimes it'll just make sure that whatever medicine you're taking is not counterindicating for it. If you have a history of psychosis or some sort of break from reality, I would really consider not doing it or talking more with folks about it and doing some more research on that.
And so what would that mean? Like my aunt is schizophrenic?
Okay, look, I'm going to get in trouble with shrinks. I don't think so. I don't think that's what it means. I mean, have you exhibited this ever? I mean, I'm getting into territory that I would be medically supported on. That's the time I pick up the phone. I say, Doc, like this person has a history of schizophrenic, and maybe if they're in their early 20s, maybe that's something to think about, because sometimes that's the only real danger of. Most often, that's if someone has sort of like a profound negative experience that lasts, which is very rare. It's usually my understanding is the time period when people are susceptible to what we call schizophrenia. I think for young men, it's in the late teens and early 20s. And I think for young women, a little later. So just to keep an eye out for that. Okay, let's put all that aside, right?
Yeah, I've had no schizophrenic episodes.
Okay, all right. So the idea is to create the safest container you can. And so you would think about the same thing a comedian would think about. You think about, does it seem like the walls are big, high enough? Let's take the lighting should be right. I'd go for low lighting. Be great to have a little eye mask so you could go inside. It depends on if you want to just go for the introspection. Then create your playlist. There's plenty of good playlists out there. I would suggest something to begin with without lyrics until the last part of it, maybe 4 or 5, because of the idea of the lyrics. You might want to do that, but if you want to go for introspection, sort of drone music or, Brian Eno always works. There's this guy, John Hopkins, and there's a bunch of good playlists, but check them out. Make sure that the music is so fucking important. And that's why when there's a live person on the other end, make sure that it's not triggering. I remember a friend of mine freaked out because he did an MDMA session. He was listening to the Johns Hopkins playlist. And Wagner came on and he freaked out because he was Jewish. He lost it. And he was like, fuck this, So make sure there's, think about that. All that's important. You're in a highly susceptible state. Then comfort. Make sure you're comfortable. Make sure that if you're a parent, that particularly moms, that you make sure that your kids are okay and that you don't have to worry about that. If all that stuff, as much of that as you can cover, and then, protect yourself from the outside world, protect yourself from the devices. Physical space should be really super comfortable so you can lie comfy, or comfortable clothes. Of course, if you're doing psilocybin, just see if you know people who have done the same batch. Careful of that. If you're doing MDMA, see if you can get it tested, at least test it for, the very small chance that it's adulterated with fentanyl. And then if you could have somebody who is maybe sitting in the room or the next room who's not going to be interfering in the process, but is going to be there as sort of a neutral, loving presence, and that's not going to try to analyze it or push you in any direction, that can sort of help you walk yourself off the ledge, then that's a good thing. And then dosing, if you're not experienced, you start out on the lower side. There's all this talk about ego death. I've only seen ego death in the cases where people have died. So dead people have ego death. Everyone else might get an ego nap for a bit, but to go into a very frightening space might be complicated. So
you don't believe in ego death?
No, I believe that sometimes your ego goes offline, but the pursuit of it, I think, can be. Yeah, I think it's good to ego go offline for all. It's happened to me. It's great. It always comes back, but I don't. The pursuit of that is the only goal, or the most the optimal goal. I think is damaging and silly. It's damaging because people are consuming large amounts that may not be in any way useful. The question is, once you have an ego death, like. This is the question. How do you treat people on the subway? Is the question. How do you treat yourself? What happens when you lose your temper at someone you love or someone you hate? That's the most important shit. So if it's in service of that, fine. But like going in pursuit of ego death, it is one of the most egoic pursuits that I've witnessed. Whose ego's died the biggest? Who's got the biggest ego death? And, so. I would say at the first you probably don't want to do that if you're a novice. You probably want to start out on the low end and understand that you can titrate upwards with psilocybin.
And so if you're doing mushrooms, that would be like a gram?
Yeah, gram and a half. And then time it. In an hour, you can check in and see if you want some more. You might want a timer there so you know it's an hour because you lose track of time. Just see where you're at. If you're cool at a gram and a half, it's beautiful.
And then do you recommend being outside versus inside?
It depends on what kind of work do you want to do. For me, like outside is a different experience. It's wonderful, but if it's out, it's this coming in from outside, and nature has a lot to teach us, right? Clearly, or the parking lot or wherever, right? But like inside with a mask in a controlled setting, and maybe in the country, or maybe Brooklyn, I don't fucking know, or Cleveland, I don't know. But like you got. That's more of a going in work, right? That's more work of like that with like a great soundtrack. I mean, that's what we specialize in. It's like playing that sound and we're in tune like you are in tune, like a good therapist is in tune. But if you can't do that, the soundtrack's next best thing. But the idea is to go in.
With what frequency should someone be doing this? I did psilocybin. Basically this exact thing. I went outside, I got an eye mask, I played a John Hopkins playlist, and I did about a gram and a half, cool. And it was extremely productive. Yeah. Genuinely like a turning point, I feel like, in my adult life where I was like, oh wow, I took my own advice. I could not have recommended it more. I really like kind of satiate a little bit of my anxiety, just like pre-show anxiety, about to go on stage and thinking like, oh, all these people hate me. Yeah. And instead of thinking that, I'm walking out there going, oh, this is gonna be so fun. We're all gonna have fun together. Yeah. And just made the shows better. Just genuinely was profound. And then over time, kind of the wear and tear of life and my psyche kind of weighs on me, and then the anxiety kind of builds back up, and the neuroses kind of edges out some of the peace that I had. Yeah. And I'm like, is this something that I should do every 6 months? Is this something I should do every year? Like, with what frequency should I approach this, you think?
I think that's really up to you. I think that...
Is it possible to do too much? If I'm doing this every weekend, is that like, all right?
Depends. There's a thing in 12 steps. The first step, right? The first step is my life has become unmanageable. And I think it's a really good metrics. If your life is unmanageable or in some way unmanageable for the use of any drug or substance or behavior, then it's something to look at. I would say in your case, it seems like, you're thinking about it. And that's the most important thing. You're thinking about it. And you're describing, so it's just like, is your life unmanageable? I mean, there's people that are just doing it over and over again whose job is not to do it. I mean, I don't do it that much anymore at all, but like I do a little bit with people, and I don't do it that much at all anymore. But what happens for me is like what happened with the ketamine, for instance, is like I was doing sound experiments with John and other folks, and I was in a deep state of rumination at the time and anxiety, and I just noticed that the fucking thing got turned down. So do I go back because I really enjoyed the ketamine? So that's fine too, but ketamines can be a little dangerous on that end. But like the idea is that when that voice gets too loud, or when that message is so far away, because you learn something, right? And your example is perfect, because that's kind of it, man. We're fucked, but we can be a little gentle in our fuckness, and maybe we're learning something. That thing that you came with, we're just here to have some fun. Well, that's still in you, right? And so what I do is I just use it as needed, you know, to turn that volume down a little bit, right? Or now it's time for a fucking total catharsis, right? So like be your guide, but I think that idea of unmanageability, my cigar intake, when it's unmanageable, I need to like watch that, right? I need to like, oh shit, man, I'm smoking one of these a day. That's insane. I'm not going to do that.
Right.
You know, it's,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, that was psilocybin. I think I might have hurt myself doing MDMA one time. I'm curious what you think of this.
It's funny because like, you said you don't do drugs, and then all these drugs are coming out.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
go on,
right?
keep the list growing.
I'm
yeah.
kind of on this wave where I'm like, I'll do anything once. So
It's a hell of a statement. Bro.
Exactly, right? So I don't consider myself like a drug user, especially like someone like you that's a fucking junkie.
Yeah,
I know.
exactly.
So if I'm talking to someone like you that's obviously experienced and a clinician in these types of things, I don't want to conflate our experiences. Yeah. I have done drugs. I don't do drugs.
Yeah. Okay.
So given that, and this MDMA experience I had kind of turned me off of it, where I was out, we were with friends, we were taking it, and we were just going to be at a party, rave kind of situation, just have like a great time, and then go to sleep. And that's basically what we did. The whole experience was awesome. This is the third time I had ever done it in my life. I had a great time. Everyone was having fun. Yeah. And I think I kind of chased a little bit. And, I went to my buddy. I was like, yo, you got any more? Like after like 2 hours. And he was like, yep, did more. And then I think I did more one more time, just like a kind of like sand on my pinky kind of thing. And then I remember reading people say, oh, don't do caffeine and MDMA. And I was like, oh, maybe that'll exacerbate the feeling. So I did caffeine. I like drank a Red Bull. And at this point now, and then I felt like kind of nauseous. I ended up throwing up. Still was feeling awesome though. Still obviously having the best time.
Great. Yeah.
And then woke up the next morning and felt generally fine. And then over the next like 3, 4, 5, 10 days.
10, huh?
Yeah, it was basically like a week and a half that I felt like I'm not in my body. I felt very disconnected. Like this conversation that we're having right now, I feel very present with you.
Yeah.
I would feel like I'm watching myself have the conversation.
Yeah.
I would go on stage and do stand-up, and I felt like I was like watching myself doing stand-up. It was the most bizarre thing ever. And then that made me really anxious.
Yeah.
I self-diagnosed myself as having what people would call DPDR, like depersonalization, derealization.
Yeah.
Which again, I don't know if any of this is real. This is just me kind of going on Reddit, just reading about shit. Yeah. And just feeling like, oh, I'm very disconnected. I'm not very present. Instead of talking to you, I'm thinking about talking to you and thinking like how I look, and I'm like completely overanalyzing every single situation in my life. And it was like crippling. And I had to go on stage. I was performing in front of theaters of people, just like with this feeling of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember the things I have to say.
Yeah.
And then over time, it kind of stopped, and I like took care of myself and slept and ate cleanly and worked out a lot. Working out was the thing that ultimately fixed it.
Yeah.
Before shows, I would just go run. I would sprint like a 5K and just exhaust myself to the point where I couldn't overthink. And now I feel like I'm better. But I'm curious.
How long ago was that?
Maybe like 6 months ago.
Right. I'm curious about your experience on stage, but I'll ask you about that later. But okay.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because it's 2024 and it's time to talk about something important. When you are seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions. Yes, that's right. The world is a crazy place, and one person's negligence can result in another's settlement. And that's why I got to talk to you about Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and over 1,000 lawyers. Yes, these are the big boys. You know them, you see their billboards all over the world. If you ever drove down I-90 from Florida to New York, I'm telling you, you've seen the billboards, all right? Have you ever watched a UFC fight? You've seen them right on the banner. I'm telling you, these are the biggest guys in the game, all right? With over $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. The annoying thing with most attorneys is that in order to submit a claim, you got to call them up, you got to talk to their people, you got to go back and forth on emails, you got to hope that they see it. They might charge you just to even look at their claim. Here's the cool thing with Morgan & Morgan. With 8 clicks or less, you can submit a claim, and one of their licensed attorneys will take a look at it and get back to you. It's that easy. It's like ordering something off Amazon. It's just a couple clicks. You can submit your claim very easily and cheap. Yeah, how about $0? That's how much it costs to submit a claim with Morgan & Morgan. Extremely easy, no fee required. So, If you are ever injured, you can go check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. That's right, unless they win for you. Unless they fight and get you compensation, you're not paying a single dollar. That's a pretty good deal. So for more information, go to forthepeople.com/Gagnon. That's correct, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, that's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's for the people, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. Now let's get back to the show after this short disclaimer.
Your experience with mushroom out in the woods, that seemed really curated, right?
Yes.
And in a sense, the healer and the curation is the DJ, right? And the club. Right? And there's plenty of clubs that are thinking about that, and a lot of DJs are thinking about it just the way. So that part of it is held in a really beautiful way. Then where does that start to go away from sort of a held container? And there's something beautiful about the chaos of it too. And you say you're not a drug user, but like, this is what they say not to do it. Yeah, that's exactly the drug user mentality. There used to be something that would happen is like there would be like a bad bag of dope that was killing people, and it used to be on the front page of the Post or something back when people, or the Daily News, and you find out what corner it was on. You'd be people walking around with that paper under their arms looking for that bag, the dope that killed people. Anyway, because it had to be good, right?
Humans are so weird.
Yeah. So to me, that's where like there was no holding there. We'll say, right? You were, and maybe there's a couple you didn't know how much you were taking, and then you coupled it with caffeine. Okay, then personal question: do you have a therapist?
I saw someone for a time, but with
not at that time,
no frequency, no.
Okay, so there was no one to sort of check in with about it, right? To help you contextualize it, to say, Mark, that you're going to be okay. I've heard about this, or your serotonin might be fucked up. There might be, and to sort of walk you through that. So you're like on your own with that, which I don't know physiologically. I won't claim to know, but those are the spaces of holding. Like, how can you hold someone after an experience, right? And that's what I would say would happen. People who have had traumatic events with a particular drug, it's like I can never, thank God, not that I would drink what the fuck's the name of that sweet fucking Southern Comfort again, right? Because when I was 14, I drank it with root beer, and I threw up, and it's just like the bottle makes me sick, right? I mean, it's pretty disgusting shit as I remember, but like. So I can never do that again, right? So the same sort of connection with that, but that might not be the truth with MDMA. Mm-hmm. But given that it was such a significant impact, you should be cautious about it. And you don't know how much you fucking took. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So do you think I could try it again? Because the first two experiences were awesome.
I think you could. I think if you knew a really good practitioner somewhere.
But it's illegal, so
Is
I don't.
it?
Yeah, exactly. I would never talk to someone about that.
I would never do it either.
Wow. Okay, so that makes me feel better. So if I were to try it again, I wouldn't be.
I would also think like, okay, look, that happened, and like I don't have any gigs. This is the other thing when you're doing it in an intentional way. Like as much time afterwards. I mean, look, going out to the club's one thing, right? But as much time afterwards, the better.
Spend 2 weeks and just be like, hey, I'm just gonna have 2 weeks where I'm kind of chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You ever experienced Datura?
Oh, wow, man. No, I've never done it myself, but I know people who have.
That's like a pretty gnarly thing.
Yeah, I knew, a friend of mine who, I don't ever call myself a shaman. I would never call myself a shaman, by the way.
People call you a shaman.
Man, yeah, but I would never call that. Maybe we're doing some of the work, but like, there's publication that's out of public, the Village Voice, which was a big thing for a while in New York. That I was on the cover of it. It was all over town. Like there's news boxes everywhere. The shaman will see you now with my picture on it, and I've never lived that down. So, but
it makes sense for marketing. People like the idea.
But I would never.
What is this guy? He's like a space holder that administers healing.
I got a podcast like tomorrow, and she's like, "Give me a sentence." I'm like, "No, you figure it out. I don't have a fucking sentence." But I was Datura. I knew somebody who did it it was a shaman who's actually, and he's he's trained in Shipibo and spent a lot of time in the jungle, and he did it. And you know, people can lose their fucking mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, I know someone else who did it as a diet, but this guy, he got to the point where, this is the best, he got to the point where he said that he could go into a villages in Peru and he could smell what was happening in a house and then visualize everything that was happening inside.
What? It's bizarre.
Yeah, man, fucking awesome. Yeah.
I mean, crazy. Was he accurate, or is this just what he thought was
I think he was accurate, but, you know, I mean, look, dude, there's stuff that I don't like to talk about publicly, but, like, there's all kinds of weird shit, man. I mean, like, when we talk about psychological stuff, I don't fucking know. Some of it's beyond that. And for me, that, we'll call it, what will we call it? We'll call it supernatural. And my practice in that, I never will say what's to a client, to someone who's coming in, this is what's happening in my internal space.
Have you ever had a telepathic experience?
Oh yeah.
What's that like?
This is shit I don't usually talk about in public, because I don't want to put that spin on it with folks. All that happens is if you have an experience that's loving and cared for, that's what it's like. When it starts to happen more and more in your life, it doesn't, you know, I'm not a telepath like some people are, but sometimes that happens, and I've seen things and witnessed things without any drugs in my body. And at this point, especially having been initiated into a couple different traditions and have been working in this world, it becomes pretty normal. And look, the reason I don't talk about it, I don't come in and say, I am this, as opposed to just a space holder, is because then I'm imposing something on your experience. I also am not going to interpret something for you. You can go to someone else for that. My job is to create the experience. Now, there's certain things that I may see and I may do things, but my sky god is my business, right? And I think that it's aiding people. I'm pretty sure it is, but I like it when I do some sort of energetic work, particularly my private practice, and the person never asks. They have profound experience and they never ask what it is, and that's better for me.
Interesting.
Because they can put any sort of interpretation on it they want.
Have you ever heard of two people consuming a substance together and then seeing the same thing?
Yeah.
It's not exactly telepathy, but it's some type of like third thing.
It's being in the same space. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have an example of maybe a friend or something that maybe you've experienced in that regard?
If you spend, let's say, I'm getting older, so I can't do it. Like, if you spend 3 days a week, or in the Ibogaine experience even longer, in some sort of space of the unordinary space, 3 days a week, 8 hours a day or more for 20-something years, then it's like asking like a truck driver, how many potholes have you hit?
It's that frequent?
Well, it's just, I don't know how frequent, there's just weird shit happening. And I don't know if I think that even like therapists can attest to like just weird shit happening, right? I think that what, and I don't want to fetishize it or make too much of it because this is my trip, right? But I think it's something that the medical community certainly is not prepared for. There are people who are, oh God, this is shit. There are people who are seers in a way that I'm not. So I know there's some people who are apprenticing with me right now. And this is more outside of Cardea, right? But who can see what's going on. And then there are people who, like me, who are just simply acting or moving by some sort of impulse, right? So, oh God, man, like, let me think, man. Like, what happened this week? I mean, man, people, like people will be saying, like my mom came, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be talking to like an apprentice or somebody, like, did you feel her mom's present? And again, I'm saying shit I shouldn't say publicly, but I'm going to fuck it. Like, did you feel her mom? Yeah, there's like heavy mom energy. Yeah. Next day, man, I was just with my mom, I mean, it happens a lot.
And is it a visual manifestation or is it just a feeling of like...
For me, it's a feeling, but some people have visual manifestations.
Wow.
The thing is not to create a cult around it, not to create a religion around it, not to create I used to say hierarchy, but I think the issue is a toxic hierarchy. So just because you can hit 3-pointers all day long don't make you a good person, right? Just because you have an ability to tell good jokes, right, doesn't make you a good person. You know, to make a room full of people laugh does not make you. And the same thing with healers. And so we got to be really careful because people want to assign so much to you. They want to assign like a guru status to you. And like, you know, I might have at this age, hopefully accumulated some wisdom, but that's also just a job description.
Yeah.
And so do I believe that I have some talent in that area? Yeah, but it's not what I'm telling folks. It's not what, and I'm not going to bring it up later.
You've met some of these like shaman bros.
Yeah.
That they kind of enjoy the thrill of giving people an experience and giving people a show.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a temptation for anybody, right? Anyone who's doing it, right? Like, I enjoy giving people an experience. I enjoy using sound and light, and but I gotta look. I'm not immune to it. I'm like, you know, I was a performer, man. If something like's not right with me, if I want to get up in front of everyone and say me, right? Yeah, that's why I know something's fucked up about you. But we'll figure that out in some mushrooms, man.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, we'll find it. To create space around you and people around you to check that, and you know, and people can make a lot more money than I've made. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, and I've been doing it longer than a lot of folks. You know, you see the shaman bros, the shaman women who, you know, the divine feminine, and you know, not that I'm like discounting that there's a divine it's interesting that there's just a whole non-binary world except when it comes to plants, and like suddenly we can just, anyways, I don't like plants got a sex and, you know, a gender, you know, okay. Same folks are saying the same shit. I don't know. Maybe it does. I'm an old motherfucker, so I don't know.
Yeah, so like this idea of Mother Gaia and things like that.
Yeah, you know, man, for me, man, Earth feels very mother. It feels very gendered, man. But, you know, this is not dismissing or any way mocking non-binary folks at all. I'm just saying, you know, to me it feels. I mean, people say they get a masculine vibe. It's funny that I'm trying to like hold like feminine space. Like when I'm in the space, people are like, that was really masculine. I'm like, wow, man, I was trying to tune into the most gentle, feminine part of me. And for me, it was. Anyway, if you're not doing like a ton of work on yourself, you're gonna really fuck up. And I'm not saying I haven't fucked up in this world, but I've always had people checking me. And I was in 12-step for years. That was really a good way to check. I've always had elders in my life, right? People who are in shamanistic traditions and different healing traditions. Always had that. Always been in touch with therapists, calling them up, hey man, like this is what's coming up for me. If you're out there and you got the magic powder and you're giving it out, like you become Kurtz in Heart of Darkness, right? You know, or like whatever, you become the guru. And yeah, I mean, if someone is super formulaic with you, fuck them. You know, if they know the answer, fuck them. Dalai Lama don't know the fucking answer, neither does the fucking Pope, man. Sorry. They don't. They got a answer. They got some wisdom. I kind of like this Pope, right? But like, well, compared to what, right? But like, but they don't. They don't. And so you want someone who might not know the answer and is willing to say, I don't know, or let's discover this together. But that takes to do this work. It takes a lot of checking in with yourself.
Do you still keep in touch with your sponsor?
I keep in touch with all kinds of 12-step people. My sponsors, yeah, some of them, yeah. Yeah.
And have you sponsored people?
Yeah, in the past. I haven't been in a substance 12-step program. I co-founded, I'm not supposed to say this publicly, but whatever, a 12-step, 12 tradition fellowship called Psychedelics in Recovery. Yeah, dude, look, I don't believe in a disease model. So there's a problem there.
Yeah, I've heard people say that, addiction or alcoholism is a disease.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I understand why they say that, and I understand the utility of saying that, but I also see the downside. I mean, it's the same thing that happened in harm reduction and happened in psychedelics. Is they decided to medicalize it as a way of making it more available,
Normalizing it.
normalized, and bringing proof into it, and then it just takes over.
So what would be an alternative to the disease model?
I think you have a syndrome. You have I like, there's the doctor's opinion, and my understanding of it, which is an AA book, is he describes it as an allergy, but he's just using metaphor. It's the same problem with DSM diagnoses, right? These are essentially metaphors that become fucking medicine and science, and it's not science. DSM is not science. It's a book of metaphor that carries the weight of not only science but law. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing happens with 12 steps. It has you can be sentenced in some states still to 12-step fellowship, which is an antithesis of the 12 traditions, which is like it's voluntary. So, I mean, we got to be careful. We're using medicine, in this case, psychiatry, as the ultimate authority. But 101 anarchism says, Noam Chomsky says, authority is not self-justifying. So if Noam Chomsky uses the example of, he has no right, no authority to grab his 4-year-old granddaughter, right? But if that child is going into the street, he has the authority to grab her, snatch her little ass up and get her out of the street, right? We gotta look at psychiatry, which is being used to legitimize, and also if you look at the work of Robert Whitaker, who has done extensive research on the way psychiatric drugs are researched, we can see that their authority is not justified. They don't have a great track record as scientists. I mean, the industry in itself. I mean, they've gone back on brain disease, and chemical imbalance in the brains like years ago, but the word hasn't gotten out. I mean, what's his name? Insel, the guy who was former director of the National Institute of Mental Health, I think. I mean, he wrote a whole book about sorry, we were wrong. So I mean, they're looking, they're looking for the antibiotic for human suffering, and so they use this metaphor that it takes over everything, and they haven't done a good job. That's not to say medicines and psychiatry hasn't helped people, but it's not this sort of exact science at all. And if you look at what they're saying now about SSRIs and stuff compared to placebos, I mean, they don't stack up very well. They stack up okay. I mean, look, it helps some people. And I think the same thing is true with psychedelics. It's being the same industries, the same institutions. I'm not saying the same people, but let's just say the same ethos and the same disciplines are researching it and with the same metrics and looking for the same type of outcomes. I think what's the most interesting and the most powerful is placebo, which is space, which is what you do, which is what I do. Placebo is where it's at. Like, placebo is what everything's measured against. So instead, it's just a placebo. Wait a minute, it's the placebo. Let's go in there. Because if it was just the jokes, if it was just the drugs, then it doesn't matter if the ceiling's high or low or the lights are this way or that way. It's just the jokes. Scientifically, it's been measured that, Mark, hit it this many times. Well, why didn't it work? It worked in Oklahoma, but it didn't work in Newark. Like, what happened, right? It's the same thing. There are good psychopharmacologists. I'm not saying. It's so weird. I have so many psychopharmacologist friends now. It's kind of crazy. And what they do, what it seems to me what they're doing is there's an art to it. They're saying, okay, here's my toolbox, and maybe this could help this person or not help this person. But mostly psychiatrists don't have time with people, like whoever prescribed your brother in front of the 7-Eleven. Mm-hmm. And it's all about time. They have to get it out, get it moving, keep it moving. And it's all about time. It's all about like the nuance of, we're so complicated, and so we have to be that caring, noticing that the same way that you are as an artist. Mm-hmm. A good therapist, a good healer is an artist who's improvising.
This makes more sense. I understand your perspective, I think, more fully. That we can't look at any of these individual things as cure-alls and panaceas and silver bullets. And simultaneously, we need to reject the people that preach these things as the cure. Whether it's, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy is the cure for everyone. And, you know, pharmaceuticals is the cure for everyone. SSRIs is the cure for depression. Psychedelics is the cure for whatever anxiety you're feeling. All of these things individually are tools, you know, in this larger tool belt that thoughtful and artistic healers can sort of administer to give different people different treatment.
Right. And the other end of it, it could be weapons that can be used for oppression and have been used, and psychiatry has been used, and the use of many drugs have been used as in tools of war, and so we have to be careful about that. The stigmatization of folks. There's literally, I forget the name of it, there was a diagnosis for runaway slaves. You know, there's and that continues like on. I mean, there's a diagnosis called authority defiance disorder. But there's a guy, Peter Levine, is a great psychologist, calls himself you should get him, man. He's fucking awesome, man. He calls himself a dissident psychologist. He says, interesting that there's a disorder defiance. What is it? Authority defiance disorder. It's a disorder, but there's no compliance disorder. Interesting, right? There should be a compliance disorder.
Right. This person complies with everything. They're so agreeable.
Yeah.
They always do whatever you ask.
Apologizing for everything. And so, you know, these things, those diagnoses, the diagnosis for a woman is different for a man. For a poor person is different for a person with resources. For a black person, it's different from a white person. So where's the science in that? And so we have to understand that these things can be really used for tools of oppression. And in order for them to be used, I also believe that we can use these medicines as a way to support change. I mean, one of the things we're doing, I should talk about this, where you know, I worked in underground and worked for years, and I worked in drop-in centers doing holistic work in the harm reduction world for years. And what I started to notice was that, like, the people who do the work, who are, you know, reversing overdoses, the people who are driving ambulances, the people who are working with autistic kids, right? The people who are working with formerly incarcerated people, they are fucking burnt and they're fried. And the people who are working on climate change or working for peace or working for, you know, a decent living, they're fucking fried. And so what we decided to do is we've created this further fund, which gives the space holders, the people, we started out with harm reduction workers, people working in what we saw is the veterans of the war on drugs. So veterans who are just burnt from working in that field, not only just to recover from burnout, but from the trauma that they've experienced of watching people die on a regular basis, or the trauma that they experience of working with in a public school system with autistic kids where they don't have the resources. So we're starting to expand it. We've got 70 people going through the process right now. We've done hundreds of ketamine sessions. We started to work with climate change activists. And I believe that we could use these medicines as a way to support folks who are making change and as a catalyst for organizing change as well.
Wow.
And so that's the further fund we're doing with Cardea. Supposed to be a New York Times article I thought I could bring you by now, but the motherfucker ain't come out yet. So, yeah.
Well, Dimitri, this is awesome, bro. I'm genuinely impressed and grateful for the work that you do. And I think that it's cool that you've dedicated your life to helping so many people and for being this therapeutic artist that uses all these tools at your disposal to truly, you know, helping people going through, you know, mental health crisis, addiction, or even just trying to learn about themselves more. I think that's genuinely awesome. And I'm really grateful that you took time today to share this with me and explain the work that you do.
Thanks, man. It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been really easy too. It's been really great, man.
This is awesome, brother. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you.
Yeah, you should definitely, if you have a YouTube channel, comment here and then link everything that people can see, and then I'll pin it. And,
okay, I got the worst. I mean, it's, bludgeoning YouTube, man. I fucking have. Okay. The answer is yes.
Let's do it, and then we'll have all the links, and that way people can find you.
My website I need to fix, but the Cardea website too, and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Dimitri, thank you, brother.
That was fucking awesome.
Let's do this again, man.
Yeah.